Hey folks, welcome back to the Meta Abuse podcast. I'm Battle Mode, you can call me Ben, and I've got a couple of special guests. You know Lucid Tactics.
Yeah, hey, this is Lucid. What's up, guys?
And we've also got Mark MSX from TheElectricUnderground.
Hello, hi everyone.
So this is the first time that Mark's been on the podcast, so I'm really excited about that. And the reason why we asked Mark to come on is because we're going to be talking about a topic that I think he's discussed quite a lot on his channel, and it's like Lucid and I have been talking about it a little bit in the background too. The topic is going to be on what is the value of critique and what is the nature of critique in video games. You know, whether it's reviews, whether it's Steam user reviews, whether it's kind of like the IGN-led mainstream media stuff, like what is it and what effect does it have on not only on the way that we kind of consume games, but also what effect does it have on the design itself? Because I think there's quite a lot to be said on both of those topics. So that's going to be what we're going to be getting into today. And so maybe if I turn it over to you guys, do either of you have like a bit of a sort of thesis you want to talk about, or like a point that you specifically want to make at the start? Shall I start with Lucid?
Sure, yeah. I've been thinking about it the past few days to kind of crystallize what it is that I think. And I think basically, I mean, this is not really a hot take, but major like mainstream game reviews are dead. I think they're dead to the point, like there's a lot of, all they do now is rage bait, and some that may not be the intent, but I think that's the only time they get engagement, to be fair. Like I never, and like I used to look at like what game should I get, I used to go look at IGN or something, or look at, you know, different kind of reviews. Like when I was a kid, I got like gaming magazines at the store. My mom might bring them back if she went on a trip or something. She'd get them from the airport. And I'd read all those. I was hanging on every word. I can't remember this was before any of the drama about like, oh God, they've got bad takes and stuff. I just didn't care about it. I never looked at them. And I think Steam reviews are obviously the major thing. That's how I think I and probably almost everybody, all the other gamers, look to see like, oh, should I get a game or not? Yeah. That combined with the trailer. I do think, and this is something I want to make sure we talk about, is that review as a work of art will stay. Like I think small YouTube channels and stuff reviewing games, that's about as relevant as like IGN. And we can talk about the reasons why, but I don't think that'll ever be like a really big thing. I mean, it's obviously a thing right now, but I don't think it's like super relevant. I think the thing that is relevant is reviews as an art form. And the difference there is like, you're not doing it right when the game releases. You can let it cook for 6 months to a year and then come back and have like really interesting things. And I think that's super useful to developers. It's really interesting to like people who are just enthused about the game or want to know about the genre or all sorts of things. And there's a ton of channels who do that really well. So I guess that's my thing. I think mainstream games media, dead. I think reviews as an art form is really cool. I mean, there's going to be content creators and stuff who do reviews on their channel that people like, but I don't think it's like super influential. And then I think Steam reviews are where it's at.
What about you, Mark? What would you think?
Well, I definitely agree that Lucid is saying that we don't have like a strong form of game critique in the mainstream, but I would go so far as to say that has actually never existed in games as an art form. Games have never had a really powerful compositional basis of critique in their entire history. I don't think that games are an extremely young medium, and the quality of critique we have now, like if you read IGN, of course, is not that great. But also, even if you go back and read old gaming mags, old IGN, stuff like that, I mean, it's sometimes shocking how hobbyist the level of analysis, even what we'd say of past magazine era game critique and stuff like that. I don't think it has ever fully developed, actually. Games have not been taken seriously in a compositional art form sort of way. And I think we're starting to get that a little bit among the sort of, reviews as art form, online, hardcore gamers reviewing games. That's starting to develop. Obviously, that's something I work towards personally, but I don't think there has ever been a history of really well done, excellent mainstream reviews, because pretty much throughout gaming's history, even think of like Nintendo Power, reviews have been very deeply connected with marketing. Reviews and marketing have always gone hand in hand in gaming. And what we're mostly seeing now is not so much a shift in that relationship, but just a shift in the tone of that relationship, where I agree completely with Lucid, where in the past, the marketing of like the Nintendo Power era and like the gaming, what was that, the gaming magazine, I can't remember what it was called, like EGN or something like that. I used to have it. That was absolutely, read that now. It's 100% marketing. It's like Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater's coming. It's gonna rule. It's awesome. And here's some cool stuff about it. And that brand of mainstream reviews is definitely, when you look back on it, a lot more refreshing than the style of reviews and marketing we get now, because it's more naive. It's more just sort of palatable.
Well, I think an honest puff piece, that's better than like trying to pretend it's not a puff piece, you know?
Exactly. I agree completely. Yes, that's exactly true. Like, game reviews of the past, they definitely were hobbyist, but you can feel that enthusiasm. The issue that a lot of the games of the gaming reviews of the past had, though, is that they were so locked in with the marketing of whatever was happening that you would get some really unfair reviews happening, especially towards like the arcade genres and stuff like that. Like, you read old reviews of arcade games and stuff, and they're just like, oh, this outdated piece of crap, it's not even in 3D. Like, we've come some way from that, where people do realize now that just having the latest hardware and graphics does not make your game good. We've gotten that far, but also, like you said, there's some sort of pseudo intellectualism that happens a lot in mainstream reviews now. Like, there was this review of like Bayonetta 3 I was reading. I don't think it talked about the gameplay one time and this was like a Polygon or something, like a mainstream reviewer.
That's common now.
Yeah, it's like, okay, if you read this, you would have no idea the gameplay shift from Bayonetta 1 to 2 to 3. You would assume it's like the same game in terms of the way it's designed. So I agree completely that the level of game critique we have now is really suspect and very driven by marketing. But I would just like to point out that I don't think we've ever had like a golden era of game critique. I don't think it's occurred yet. That has yet to happen.
Well, I think there was if there was a golden era, it was quite a watered down and not very good era. As far back as I remember, so I was playing games in the 80s, but I was a kid, right? But the earliest games magazines I can remember reading were the ones for the home computers. So I'm talking about the ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64. I forget if they were particularly big in the United States or not, but certainly in the UK, the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum were really big home computers. They brought home computing into the home, and people could afford them because they were relatively cheap, and they were half decent games machines as well, particularly the C64. So the earliest magazines I was reading were probably about 87, 88. And I wasn't really old enough to be able to analyze the critique, I'll be honest. Remembering back and having read a few of these magazines recently, they are much better than they got in the 90s once the big consoles from Sega and Nintendo really started to take over. Yeah. The reason being is because I think that the bedroom producer era, it was in the era of the bedroom producer, and these guys would send their games in on cassette to a publisher, and the publisher would market them out, and more often than not these games ended up in the bargain bin of places like the equivalent of Walmart. You'd have like a bin at the bottom of an aisle and they'd just be full of cassettes, and they'd have these games on. And so I think that there was less of a obvious marketing slant and there was a little bit more genuine critique then. However, you'd have to go back and analyze that yourself. Go read Crash magazine, which is a ZX Spectrum one, or Zap 64, and you'll be able to kind of get an idea of what it was like in the sort of mid to late 80s. I'm completely on board that I think by the 90s it really did switch into full-on marketing. I remember buying a few games for the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis and thinking, God, this is no way as good as this was marketed to be. You know, like, wow, how is this a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10? This game fucking sucks. So I think that, the quality of mainstream critique particularly changed. Before we go any further, I just want to put my little thing out there, which is, knowing a little bit about the industry, games developers, I'm interested to kind of know what games developers use, right? They are very, very interested in Steam reviews right now. And the way that Steam reviews work, particularly with the refund window, I think does actually affect how some developers are approaching games. And like Lucid and I have had some back and forth over this. He thinks it's maybe a bit of a conspiracy theory, but I think there might be something to
I
it.
agree with you 100%. I agree. I'm on your side here completely. I've actually witnessed this myself. I know that game developers, they are obsessed with metrics. And so when you get a metric-driven review system like Steam reviews, Metacritic, it is like candy to developers. They can't resist it. They do look at this stuff. And I've seen in real time, like a game come out. I mean, there's so many. Wanted Dead did this. A lot of indie games did this. There's one, Final Vendetta, I really liked, where there was just a fair amount of Steam backlash like, hey, we don't like that you're making us do a 1cc. You should add continues. Like a week later, all right, here are your continues. Like, no, this is very, very relevant and happening a lot. I think developers are extremely tapped in to this this marketing, this collective style of analytics-driven reviews. They really pay attention to that a lot.
On the other hand, they don't care about most review sites at all. However, the one thing that they are very, very serious about is Metacritic. Now, they don't. So most gamers don't care about Metacritic, right? We don't care one shit about it. Who cares about Metacritic? I don't. I never really look at it. But financiers do. So if you're a developer or a publisher, and you've got games that are high on Metacritic, you are much more likely to get financed than you will if you don't. And that's one thing. So actually, it turns out most of the mainstream media places, I think, is probably owned by IGN now. I think that IGN have bought out a whole bunch of them.
IGN bought them all.
Yeah. So if you've got to kind of please IGN or their, whoever it is who pulls the strings behind them, because if you want your game to be, if you are a big developer, and the bigger the developer you are, the more money you got to make, and the more you got to monetize your game, and the more it's got to sell, then the more you have to please the people who put these reviews out, because if you want your finance, you've got to be high on Metacritic. Now I
have some bad news, because it's not just big developers, it's also indie developers now. Because if you want to move up, like let's say you make an indie game and it gets a really high Metacritic score, if you want to move upward and maybe get an opportunity with a bigger publisher like Konami, someone like that, they're going to look at that. They're going to be like, wow, you had a game, it was 88% on Metacritic. That's great. Versus, let's say you had a controversially difficult game with a low, like Wanted Dead or something, with like a low Metacritic score. Publishers, that's not indie, but a publisher is going to look at that and be like, playa. So it affects everyone, not just big developers. I think it affects indie devs as well.
So as you can see, guys, this topic is big, and we've not even talked about Steam reviews, how they can get brigaded, how they can actually, sometimes you get some genuinely great feedback. Like as I work for a developer, and I look through Steam reviews as part of my job. So I read a lot of them, and I pay a particular attention to things like recent review scores and all reviews, and those metrics there. They're really important. For developers and publishers, find them super important. And like we've got on the screen right now, Lucid's just looking at Wanted Dead. That's got a mixed review, right? That can be a death sentence to a game, and it's really hard to get out of that score once you've got there. So there's a lot to think about in this topic. It's really, really big, that's why I thought it'd be really interesting to talk about. So, but yeah, I just wanted to. That was what I wanted. Topic. So that's what I just wanted to put forward, was just that I think that it's not just about whether the reviews are useful for the public. I think it's also, we have to consider how it changes game design in a sense, because developers will use these different methods of critique to kind of as a telemetry for where they're going to be going with their game.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating about Steam reviews is I think the way we discuss and look at them should be shifted a little bit, because I think Steam reviews are really important, but I don't think you should view them as equivalent to critique, as in equivalent to review by game journalists, they're so bad that they can't even, have some credibility. But let's say theoretically there was a good game reviewer, game journalist. Because the problem with Steam reviews is it's more along the line of customer feedback, like product feedback, than it is necessarily a comprehensive review of a game. Because, like, for example, if you make a game that's really tapping into a trend in modern design, like Vampire Survivors, for example, that game has insanely high review scores on Steam. It's like, but it's also like super cheap. It's super it's a very powerful progression-based system. People are digging into that. So basically, if you have a product that really appeals to the mass market, it's going to do gangbusters in Steam reviews.
Yeah.
But does that make it equivalent to an incredibly well-developed game? Because you look, for example, if you look on Steam reviews, Vampire Survivors and Mushihime-sama are equivalent in Steam review feedback.
Right.
I will fight to the death to put Mushihime-sama as a significantly better game than Vampire Survivors.
Mushihime-sama.
Let's see.
That's
the name of the game?
Yeah, Mushihime.
Mushihime.
That's the one.
Sama.
I've been playing that recently, by the way. I love Mushihime-sama. Really good game. Yeah, I've been playing it again recently. It's so hard.
It's a landmark. Landmark game in the.
Let's have that fight then. Because first of all, they could be different genres, but I would say Vampire Survivor seems to be like a much
better game.
I think I don't want to get into like objectively better, but I think it's like a game that resonated much more strongly with gamers than this did.
Sure, that's my point though.
Vampire Survivor literally invented a new genre. I'll go to bat. It's not even like my type of game, but I played it for hours and had fun.
Yeah, it's a progression system though. The entire game is a progression system.
What? By the way, I've not played this. Can somebody just? Is it like a roguelite? Is that what it is? Like a roguelite?
Yes, it's a roguelite. It's a roguelite it's a roguelite with a meta progression system.
Yeah. Where
the more you grind it, the more you unlock. And the entire design of the game is based around doing DPS. And it actually has no enemy AI outside of just fully tracking you. So it doesn't have bosses or dodging or patterns. The entire game is checking for DPS. And then the actual meta of the game has nothing to do with dodging and spacing like a bullet hell. It's on RPG. It's all about stat builds and making sure your DPS is high. And once you have that, you achieve what I call RPG breakaway, which is basically once you get your DPS high enough, you can almost sit still and beat the level. All you have to do is go back and forth. And then when you get into the late stage of every level, they all become just this same swarm and because there's no variation in enemy design across all the levels. All the enemies do is just walk towards you in swarms. They don't have any variation in their enemy design. So what ends up happening is once you pass the progression system, once you achieve RPG breakaway, the game is over. It doesn't have dodging, spacing, mastery, scoring. And so if you go and read, if you go online and you read, how do you get good at Vampire Survivors? Everyone will basically, the advice has to be, okay, you just grind and level up. Because Vampire Survivors is a very cleverly designed game because it's very good at pushing forward this progression system, which is very addictive, especially in modern gaming. We love progression.
I don't think the meta progression is that strong.
It's insanely
the meta progression of Vampire. It's sort of strong. It's not I think you can beat it pretty much your first run. If you need to know weapon abilities to get. No, because you don't have enough damage. You do not. Because what happens is your very first run. What happens is you get about 5 minutes in, and you can kind of try to damage things faster. But also, Vampire Survivors, everything's automated. I'm gonna have so your attacks are automated, and so your very first run of Vampire Survivors, it is literally impossible to beat the stage. Their very first run because you do not have enough control or DPS. But what you do is you build up
your meta progression
30
and
hours?
level up. And so if you booted Vampire Survivors and did a clean, fresh save, you will not be able to beat.
I'm going to do this.
Okay, let's.
I'm going to do this and see if it. You might be right. Yeah, we'll see.
Are we gonna do it now?
Yeah, could be.
Okay. So yeah,
I don't think we have time. We'd ruin the podcast.
While he's going, I'll explain because
yeah,
that'd be funny. The rest of the podcast, it's like me playing Vampire Survivor with like half my brain.
Yeah, make sure though, don't use your meta progression. So don't use all your like damage.
Stuff I understand.
From the roguelite. A fresh, clean run.
Yeah.
Because what happens is you get about 5 minutes into the run, and it spawns these swarms of enemies. Remember, all the enemies fully track you. There's no variation in any of the enemy behavior. So what ends up happening is you just get DPS'd out. You do not have enough DPS to overcome this. And but the game gives the illusion that maybe if you were like really good, maybe, but it's not possible because for one, your hitbox in Vampire Survivors is literally your entire sprite. It doesn't have like a proper hitbox that's located in the center of your character and stuff, like a bowhell and stuff. Like your arm and your foot is the hitbox is literally just your sprite outline itself. And so the game gives this illusion that there's skill. That's what it's really good at doing. Like it gives the illusion that there's skill happening here. But once you achieve the meta progression, there is no skill. Like skill cannot happen.
No, I don't agree with some of this. Like I think that the game doesn't really like. I don't think people really think they're good because like I mean, just me. Like I intuitively just said like if I'd play it with like 10% of my brain because you're not while you're in flow state because you're like moving around, sort of dodging things. Like it's not hard.
You don't need to do that.
Nobody's thinking like, oh God, I'm the world's best Vampire Survivor player. I mean, maybe they are, but I think the thing that it really does is it just has. I think the real progression system is the in-game progression. Like the difference
what it is.
Between your character at like when you first load and then like 10 minutes into the game. I mean, you're like a god compared to when you were first in there. And so basically, it's these short games where you're scaling up crazily, and that's kind of fun. And then eventually, you're right. You reach I like your term, RPG breakaway point, and
the game's over.
And it's pretty much over. But you have like 5 minutes to kind of gloat on it while the enemies are marching at you. And sometimes you can kind of reach that point and still lose. Like if you start failing the DPS check, it's over. Yeah. I've had that happen before.
Just quickly, guys.
The game comes down to, it's actually. The game isn't the part where you're walking around. The game is actually the leveling up system. That is right. The game.
Let's bring this back to the reviews, guys. Because I'm sorry to interrupt.
Well, anyway, I'll bring it back.
Yeah.
I'll bring it back. So what I'm saying is, Vampire Survivors, for example, is really well developed at actually pointing out what I'm saying. Like it will tap into this really powerful like meta progression hook that people will engage with and they'll like, but ultimately it's a much more shallow game than something like Mushihime-sama, which has a depth and complexity of skill that just massively outlasts something like Vampire Survivors. So Mushihime-sama came out in the 2000s and to this day is still really ahead of a lot of stuff coming out now versus Vampire Survivors in about maybe even now, but in a few years, like there's not going to be a significance to playing that game because what's going to happen is its meta progression formula is like, oh, okay, got that. And then other games are going to incorporate that in there. And it will be like historically, Vampire Survivors was a progression system with a sort of bullet hell aesthetic attached to it. But it won't have the same longevity and depth as something like Mushihime-sama. But if you look at Steam reviews, a Steam review could never capture that, right? A Steam review will always capture mass consensus. It will always capture mass audience. It can't capture a more like long-term view of a game.
Let me pitch Steam reviews in maybe a different way, because I think we've talked a little bit about it being like a customer feedback. This is, by the way, like another kind of riff on. We were talking about cute stuff before the the podcast started. But yeah, this is like a cute vampire survivor, but it's got a ton of people
We're
playing
gonna see a
and
lot.
a much more. It's got more bullet hell things where their bosses are different. They've got power moves. They're shooting them at you. So, there's going to be, I think this is the thing, is professional critics will like look at this and they'll be like, oh, I can see so many ways this game could be better, or it's shallow. What Steam reviews do, in my opinion, is they say, how compelling is the fantasy behind this game? Like, how compelling is the idea of the game, and how well do you deliver on it? And how compelling it is, that part is usually has to do with, it's not like I can give you a number, but it has to do with how many reviews there are. And how well you deliver it is the score. So if you have a game that's got like 99% reviews positive, but like that's 99% of like, 75 reviews, so everybody but one person or something, that's like, sure, they delivered on the vision, but the vision might have been super basic. Like, it might have been this trailer that correctly describes what you're going to get, but it's just not like, it's not over the top, but it was an honest trailer. People do it. You could also have a game which promises everything. It's like, oh, you get to be this samurai ninja and you sneak around and you get to develop your own poisons and put them on your weapons, and you want different poisons for different people, and you can poison people by putting stuff in food, but you got to get to the food cabinet. Some elaborate fantasy, and then you play the game and you're like, oh, this is shit. This is total shit.
Yeah.
And then that game is going to have a ton of reviews, but they're going to be bad. So
I would say
I think that's the thing is
to look at Steam reviews is you look at it as a metric into itself, but it is not a replacement for like a full critical review, because it can only capture a certain band of a game, right? It can capture how is it appealing to a mass audience, but that is not the only metric of which a game is valuable or good or not, because there's many games that maybe when they first came out, they did not appeal to a mass audience, that maybe this, Steam reviews are some examples, but also maybe Metacritic reviews, but it can't capture the full scope of what a game is. So for example, would you say then that with Steam reviews, like a Steam review is like a 1-to-1 metric of how good a game is? The higher the Steam review, the better the game. The lower the Steam review, the worse the game?
No, I don't think that's true.
I think like trying to be ultra precise, like higher, lower, I think like, I mean, who cares at some level? I think it's like, but if you show me a game that's got 90+% Steam reviews positive and it's got over 50,000 reviews, like this is a game that touched people. Yeah. Like this is a special game. I think there's very few exceptions where that's not the case.
Yeah, generally speaking, just like
you
disentangle this.
Go ahead.
Sorry, just to disentangle this from the from the cerebral discussion. If I see a game that's overwhelmingly positive on Steam, I've got a pretty good chance of being able to of thinking that's going to be a decent game, generally speaking. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be a great game that's going to last for all time, but I know that it's going to have a certain level of polish. It's going to have a certain level of gameplay, and it's probably got mass appeal as well. I think those are the things that you can infer from that, generally speaking. I think what Mark was getting at was it doesn't necessarily mean it's a great game that will last, that will be a masterpiece that will last for generations. And I agree with that too. I think that's fair.
Exactly.
But yeah, sorry, Lucid, to jump in, but.
Can we think of games that had 50 to 100,000 reviews and they were like 90% positive that weren't that like the attention's faded from them? They're not really masterpieces anymore.
I don't know. Like, okay, so I'd give an example of, okay, this is not quite like that, but it's somewhere nearby. So Metal Gear Solid 5, right, when that released, it was massively popular. Everyone loved it. Most people loved it, and I by the way, I've got a bit of a guilty pleasure. It's one of my comfort food games that I'll just put on and just play a few missions from every now and again. So I've got a bit of a soft spot for it. But it's kind of a bad game in some respects. It's not perfect. It's certainly probably not worth. I don't know if I was to critically review that game, I think it's flawed, and it doesn't mean that it's not fun. And so there's one of the things that we look for in that I would look for in Steam reviews is how much is this game I don't know, like, you have to remember that a lot of gamers don't play, they're not like us, they're not games critics, or they're interested in talking about games a lot, or they're even game addicts, or they're gamers in inverted commas. Most people just buy 1 or 2 games on Steam and they play that. So there are people who play Civilization who do not play anything else on Steam. Yeah. We know that for a fact. Yeah. There are people who play Civ who don't know what a 4X is, so they'll have never played Endless Space or Stellaris, or they'll have looked at the Paradox stuff. And there are people who probably bought Metal Gear Solid 5 who never bought any other PC games. And so one thing that Steam reviews often will model is those kind of casual gamers, normie gamers, whatever you want to call them, that only play a game for 20 hours, they enjoy it, they leave the positive thumbs up, and then they move on to the next shiny thing. So there's also those guys as well. The people who just see whatever's being advertised on Steam front page, whatever's getting pushed in the algorithm, and they play the game. They play Metal Gear Solid. They enjoy it. They have fun with all the mechanics. They play around with the stealth stuff, whatever, and they play through the meta progression stuff. But they don't stick around with it for 200 hours and start seeing the structural flaws in it. And so those are the kind of flaws that start showing through the more you play. Or for example, a 4X game is a great example. I used to have a rule at Explorminate that if I didn't play the game for at least 40 hours, I would not touch a review, because how could you know? The game of Stellaris takes like 20 hours just for one game. So how can you give a decent review? One of you said this earlier on as well in the pod, but what value do week 1 or day 1 reviews have when games are patched for like the next 2 weeks? They're usually broken as hell on release. And so if I go back and read a review from 2010 and all it's talking about is, let's say I go back and read a review of Mushi, and let's say Mushi got when it released, it had a bunch of bugs, so all the reviews are like 40%, even though it's like an amazing bullet hell game, it's one of the best ever made. But when it was on release, it was a bit janky and it got patched 2 weeks later. But that's not going to be reflected in old reviews, right? So Steam reviews are very, very deceptive, and they model.
Oh well, time out. They show that. They show recent reviews. We can go and look at Mushi, and we can look at the graph.
The Steam release of Mushi is like
it's the polished version.
Mushi's been released
really
like multiple times. It
was a bad example. Sorry.
The Steam release of Mushi is like incredibly solid. Like there's no issues with it, basically.
I use a bad example, sorry guys, but the point was that Steam reviews are a bit deceptive. They tend to top load for casual gamers who only play for a short amount of time.
I got an example for you. Yeah. Look up Tekken 8.
Hit me with it.
Tekken 8.
Oh yeah, this could be a good one. Mark, we need to talk about Tekken 8 sometime.
Yeah, so Tekken 8 is a great example of Tekken 8's a great example of what you're talking about, because when it came out, Tekken 8 was a very solid release when it came out. I was like, whoa, great job, Namco. Everyone was like that. It was pretty
What did they do here?
Well, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So Tekken 8 comes out.
It's bad.
It has an amazing launch. Everyone, myself included, we're like, this game has a lot of potential. And especially with fighting games, it's very hard to tell, too, because the meta hasn't quite developed. So even in my review for it, I was like, okay, the one part of it that's kind of concerning is the heat system. It seems like it's behaving itself now, but it could become something later on. Let's keep an eye on that. Well, like a month or two later, they're like, all right, now we're adding in microtransaction shop or a DLC shop or something. So that wasn't there in the initial launch version. So it's not in any of the mainstream reviews because it wasn't there at launch. They clear that launch zone. Here comes the DLC shop.
Yep.
And then of course, in a fighting game, and a lot of competitive types of games, they have no like solid form because they get patched, they get updated, new characters are added, the meta shifts, the meta changes. Mm-hmm. And so Tekken 8 has been like since launch this roller coaster, up and down, up and down. So like there's a huge negative spike when
people, whatever happened here, people didn't like this either.
Was that Hihachi, I think?
Well, they charged.
This is like
what happened is that when it launched, you bought this season ultimate pass where you're supposed to get all of the content. But then at the end, when they launched Hihachi, they made those people buy a stage, even though they bought the pass. So then that caused a massive amount of backlash, I think justifiably so. But this is what exactly I'm talking about, with Steam reviews being more of a customer service barometer rather than necessarily reflecting the quality of the game, because in terms of customer service, what Namco did with that stage is shady. So I would be like, yeah, it makes sense to leave a negative review as customer feedback. But as a critic, did making you pay $5 for that stage in the long view of Tekken 8, like in the long distance view of that, did that really affect the quality of the game where we know in like a year that stage will be included?
What was this one? This last bomb?
Maybe the season 2 update. They have a season 2 update.
Oh, okay. Because this was way worse than this previous one.
Because they were going to add chip to throw. They were going to add chip to throws, which is insane. And then everyone's like, don't. And then Namco were like, okay, we won't. See, this is what I'm saying. This is what we were talking about earlier, where they are very much paying attention to the audience, and they have no clear, coherent vision for what this game is. All they know, all Namco knows, they're sitting in their studio, all they know is they want to appease as large of an audience as possible. But when you have multiple demographics of players with multiple demographics of tastes, and those tastes don't naturally just coincide, you've got legacy players who want more skill-based changes. You've got newer players who enjoy the more like, okay, let's have lots of heat mechanics and 50-50s and stuff. And so you have these competing interests within the design of the game. Steam reviews are not going to be able to give you the answer. Like you as the developer have to know what the vision is. You have to know, is this game going to appeal to the expert-based players, the legacy players, or is this game going to appeal?
Okay, how would you, because this is a game you have experience with, how would you rate Tekken 8? As a standalone, how it is right now?
I stopped playing it.
So that's funny.
I just got back to
Virtua Fighter. I'm going to be... Yeah, exactly. So next week,
is this a spoiler question?
No. So next
like
week,
a review you're cooking on?
Yes, next week I'm going to be reviewing the season 2 update and seeing where it stands. But in terms
so
of the
prior to
season
season 2.
Yes. So season 1, in the legacy of Tekken, if you put the Tekken titles in a line next to each other, Tekken 8 would rank very low compared to the previous Tekken games.
Yeah.
It's so much more of a mess. It's so much more... The meta is reduced.
Band-Aid game mechanics. What I call Band-Aid game mechanics.
Yeah, exactly. It's just they're throwing stuff in there. They're taking it out. They have no coherent vision for this game.
Am I crazy then? Because I feel like that's what Steam's saying. Steam, like when I look at this, the way I read this is like, this is like a legacy IP. People don't really like it that much, and they're fucking up stuff with DLC. Like,
look how many it's sold.
That's what this
Lucid
says to me.
Look how many it's sold though, and it's sold a massive amount. And like for example, this character they're advertising here, she was my main in Tekken 7, Hannah, and so normally I'd be super excited for her to be in the game, but Tekken 8's such a mess that like I enjoyed it for a little while. I think I was about 20-30 hours. That's all I put into it. I put hundreds of hours into Tekken 7, and Tekken 7 isn't an amazing, like, it's a good game. I enjoyed it, but once I started getting my eye for critique, I started seeing problems with that as well.
Yeah,
but I think
exactly.
Like, but so
and
it's funny.
If you looked at the Steam reviews for Tekken 7 and you looked at the sales and the Metacritic score, you would come to the conclusion that Tekken 7 is the greatest Tekken game of all time. It's nailing everything.
Yeah,
high Steam reviews, high Metacritic scores, highest sales.
High player counts, yeah.
But most Tekken players, myself included, would not say Tekken 7 is the greatest Tekken game by a long shot. You know, I would say definitely Tekken 5 is much better. I like
Tekken 3. I thought Tekken 3 was the best one.
Of course, Tekken 3 rules. Tekken 3 rules. But that's what I'm saying is what you can use these Steam reviews to kind of get a gauge
it's not on Steam,
of what's happening. You can use the Steam reviews to kind of get a gauge of what's happening with the game, what's happening with its relationship with its audience. But in terms of the final analysis, the final sort of the deeper, more intricate layers of critique, Steam reviews can only be a tool. They cannot be the end all be all. They cannot be the end point. They can only be part of your analysis. Same thing with Metacritic. Same thing with all this.
I think the other part is like you look at the review, not the review, the trailer that comes out, and you maybe watch like a little bit of a Let's Play or something. And if you're sold on that, like, oh, this is something that looks cool to me, that Steam review means did that thing deliver on it? So if you look at Tekken and you looked at this and you look at this trailer, because they're probably going to have a sick trailer for Tekken 8, right? Like, I'm guessing it's good, right?
They do the bombastic.
So they have some sick trailer, and if you're the kind of person that looks at this and you like it, then you look over here and you say, did they deliver that? And I think those are the two main things that you need to identify a game. Does the trailer appeal to me, and then are the reviews for that good? The thing that I think is the exception to that is I do think one of the major, and we kind of been beating around this bush a little bit, but people who are like treating these reviews as war grounds, where it's like they're bombing it because, you know, some small thing like you were saying, like they do a DLC they overpriced, right?
Yeah.
Or something like that, where that doesn't actually affect the game. Or like there's some woke content or something in the game and people are bombing it, but then you also have the people that are coming out to like counter bomb it, right? So you end up with like these reviews where it's like, oh, it's a 10 out of 10 or oh, it's a 1 out of 10. And obviously that's stupid.
Yeah. But I would say even beyond just that though, even in terms of like the DLC thing, for example, right? I'm not sure I would say that's invalid. Like you bought the season pass, you paid it. Like that's what I'm saying. I think these Steam reviews are more reflective of a customer experience than the game as a piece of art, the game as art ultimately, because I think as a piece of customer experience, it is valid if you paid $100 for the season pass and then they're like, by the way, you got to pay us more money. You're like, no. So it's because it's the only way you as a customer can communicate to the developer. Like you want to communicate to them. I don't like this whole going back on the season pass thing. So I think that is valid in terms of using the Steam review to communicate that to the developer. But that's something that, like I said, that's where I think the Steam reviews really function really well as like a tool between the players and the developer as a communication of how they're feeling about it, how they're receiving it. But that's just one aspect of the game, more of the game as a product. Yeah. And I view games as an art form. So you have to go past just viewing it as a product, because some games could be amazing products, but are they higher works of art? How do they stack up as works of art? I do really value Steam reviews in that respect, is a relationship in terms of the developer and the player as a product. But I also think game critics, I don't think players need to worry about this. I don't think if you're a player, you don't need to worry about this. But if you're a critic, you need to go past just viewing the game as a product, and you need to start viewing it as a work of art.
Yeah, I agree.
And that brings in more complex questions than simply, does it have a high Steam review or not? Because as a critic, if you just put that as the basis of your critique, you might as well not exist. Why be a critic if your entire basis of your analysis is just matching the matching the meta score and matching the Steam score? So that's where critics need to differentiate themselves. Players, you don't have to do that. Player, you can do whatever you want. You're free, So if you feel like, for example, like Wanted Dead, as a player, if it's appealing to you in a way that it doesn't appeal to 80% of the audience, and you buy it and you connect with it, that's completely valid. I personally really like Wanted Dead. So I feel like the place that's the difference point is players don't have the same level of having to go past these types of things as critics do. And I wouldn't hold players to that same standard. Like as a player, if you look, it has a great Steam review, it looks interesting to you, you're like, all right, let's go for it. That makes sense. But as a critic, you have to push beyond just that. Yeah.
When we're talking about the value of critique to developers, because they are looking at these Steam reviews often and trying to kind of ascertain what the customers are thinking. There's a thing that you have to be a little bit careful of, and that is that there's a saying in the in the development community, which is gamers are really good at knowing when there's a problem. They're less good at knowing what that problem is, and they're absolutely terrible at proposing solutions. And
amazing.
So I mean, I know all three of us here are doing our own bits of game development here and there, right? So this is an important thing to understand, because, and I'm not insulting any customers, by the way, or any gamers. It's a fact that often I think Steam reviews can model this particular thing, which is people will come in, they'll play a game, and particularly with a game that's not perfect, right? If it's not like one of these overwhelmingly positive games which is super polished, comes out the door like, just really, really in great condition. If the game's got like numerous flaws, but gamers are not quite able to put their finger on quite what it is that's annoying them about the game, but it's just kind of general, they just got a feeling that it's not quite right, they will often go and look at other Steam reviews and they'll read through them, and they will tend to pick up on what other people are saying. So you get this what I call probably a little bit unkindly, but Steam meme brain thinking, where people will see something else that people are complaining about, they kind of like get this idea, that's what I noticed about it, and then they'll just copy that. So and you'll see this, like if you follow any games, if you know any games well, like I work on a couple of games that work with work, and you'll see people, there'll be a false claim made, right, and it will be just factually wrong, but because maybe the gamers are not quite satisfied with the game in other ways, they will latch on to that false thing. So there'll be something that is literally factually incorrect, but they'll repeat it, and you'll see these reviews repeating, and there are often people who are just saying pretty much the same thing, and you mustn't discount them because they're still dissatisfied. You can't just go, they're lying. It's not that simple. They have picked up on a problem with the game, but they've reached out to look for what is it that's annoying me, and they read other negative reviews clearly, and then they see, often you can catch them out because somebody will have said something that's factually incorrect. All it takes is one, and then you get hordes of people repeating it. So like you're able to verify that this is a fact, through occasionally people just kind of lie about stuff, and then loads of people just copy it. And it can't be that all of the people are getting that wrong. It's not. It's statistically unlikely, right? So it's an interesting phenomenon. I think that so Steam reviews can often be a little bit misleading because people have a genuine feeling that something's not right, but they don't always know what that is. It's enough for them to leave a negative review, and they'll often parrot something that other people have said, whether it's right or wrong, and that is really, really difficult for a developer particularly to be able to navigate.
I agree completely, especially if the issue is more deeply layered into like the structure of the game, or more deeply layered into things that aren't like just obvious giant signal posts of an issue. I think, again, going back to Tekken 8, this is a problem with Tekken 8. Like, there's lots of things you can point to being like, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem right. But it's more of like the okay, I'm going to try to say the word combined. Let's just go with that. The combined effect of all of these kind of issues building on top of each other, that's creating this overall, like, something's not right here.
Yeah.
But it's not as simple of a solution as like, remove chip. Boom, fixed. Because removing chip would help, but that's not the only issue. There's more, you know what I mean? So I agree completely.
Yeah, and I think that's why you often see some games that probably have lower review scores than they maybe really should. Because the other thing is that there's no neutral review as well. You see people asking for a neutral review, and I think maybe we're going off track a little bit, but would you think that would be helpful to have like, neither thumbs up nor thumbs down? Because I think a lot of people would use that option if they had it.
I think it'd probably be good that on Steam.
I would use that so much if that was a possibility on Steam, because I feel that way about a lot of games. I feel a lot of way about like, it is what it is. That should be like, it's just like a face going like, I don't know, because there's a lot of games that sort of ride that line between it's not great, but it's not terrible. I mean, a lot. So, but the problem is that it feels really extreme to be like, negative, so I tend in these scenarios, I usually just don't leave a review because it's like that's the only way to sort of be neutral. But if there was a built-in neutral option, I agree, it would be a lot helpful, because there are, I think, a lot of games that you notice they don't really sit in the mid-range very much. They either push into the positive or they push into the negative, but a lot of games probably deserve to sit in that mid-range. So I think that would be an excellent inclusion.
This also compounds
the nice
into
thing about
sorry, go ahead, Lucid.
The nice thing about not having it on Steam is that it limits your ability to bomb. Like, if it's IGN and it's a 10 scale, if you're on Metacritic, it's a 10 scale, you give a 1. But Steam, you're literally like, I liked it or I didn't. So you don't have people doing these like extreme reviews. I mean, they do, but it's in text. It still gets condensed to like yay or nay. So I think there is some, and I think that's the main reason to keep it. Is like the more granular you make the reviews, the more open you make it to bombing.
One thing that does compound out of this issue, though, I'd say, is that we also get like brand loyalty. So you get people. I read a lot of reviews, and you know, whether it's, you know, in our favor or not, I can't help but raise an eyebrow when you see people give a negative review saying the game sucks in various ways, or, you know, maybe in a polite way, but they give it a thumbs up and they're like, well, you know, I kind of just want to support the developer. And it's like, how useful is that? Like, I understand why you're doing that, but if there was a neutral review, I think that would be a much better way of kind of saying, look, I like this review, this publisher or this, you know, this developer, but they've kind of dropped the ball here. But I want to give it a thumb up anyway. And then you get people who, you know, just antagonistically, the Hihachi stage, they'll just thumb it up anyway. Yes. Like, I don't care what these guys are saying. I'm just gonna, you know, I support Bamco. Yeah. So it really
we're gonna test this, but.
Sure, go ahead, but like it really throws out the idea of this thing being useful as critique. I think that, you know, it's another way that the actual format of the Steam review devalues it as genuine critique. I mean, I think we've probably realised now they're not good critique.
I took Dragon Age Veilguard.
Okay, this is a good one.
I filtered for the reviews, and I filtered for only positive. Right. Look at the very first one. Short version. I believe Veilguard is the weakest game in the series. That's the opening line.
Yeah.
Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Next one. This is a tricky game to review. It's not bad, but I don't think it's good.
Right.
Thumbs up review.
Next one. Exactly.
Okay, we finally get an actual positive review. I honestly don't care what anyone says. I love this game and have been a fan for ages. It's not the best. Oh no, it's not even positive. It's not the best Dragon Age game.
This is what I mean.
Almost.
So that's where the lack of granularity bites you in the ass, right? Because you get that, because this just throws it out now as useful critique, apart from to developers who are going to find it useful, but to as a customer, that's fucking useless to me, man.
Also, too, because games are such a complex medium in terms of what people are coming to it and for what reason. Also, when you make it kind of like, again, something that's more collective, lots of different people, you're going to have a lot more of sort of complications of things happening that aren't really directly related to the gameplay, like you said. Like one guy loves the series and he will ride or die for the series, and so he's going in there and he's doing the thumbs up. Another guy, maybe he irrationally hates the series for some reason. He's going in, he's thumbing it down, and so that's why I think it's really an interesting metric to look at, and you can learn a lot about the game's relationship to the players with it, but it just cannot be the end point because it's not factoring everything in.
Let's compare this to Metacritic. So this is Dragon Age Veilguard on Metacritic. This has the bombing problem, right? Because you have some people who nobody's in the middle, and this is because they allowed more granularity, and you have people come in, and I don't know if I can get it. Let's see if it'll show us the breakdown. Yeah, people are bombing it really hard. Like it's probably not a 2 game, you know? Like
no, it's not. It's not.
People are entitled to their opinion.
People say it's quite a good game. It's unfortunate that they just put some modern day politics in there, which rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way. That's basically what happened, I think. But apparently as a game, it's
then you have the critic score, which says it's 82, which I haven't played it. I used to love the old Dragon Age games, but it didn't look up my alley. Watching the people play it, I didn't have any fear of missing out on this one. But I think Steam did pretty good. I think 70 is actually pretty close to what it is. I think, like, if you look at this, it's way better than I think either the Metacritic score for users or the Metacritic score for critics. That's my personal take on it.
That's interesting. That's a good point.
I think in this way, we see the virtue of the Steam system compared to like the Metacritic system.
I would say if you if it's like a duel between Steam reviews and Metacritic, Steam reviews I think are better. Like if you had a gunfight between the two, which one's better? I would definitely say Steam reviews, because at least Steam reviews capture a more wide audience, and there's going to be opinions that are not going to get factored into like Metacritic scores.
Well, they don't play the games for a start, do they? The journalists from IGN don't actually play the games very much.
Exactly. Like a hardcore, for example, if you're a veteran player and you know the meta of the game, you're a hardcore player, the Metacritic scores are probably not going to ever reflect you, because that demographic is never going to get reflected in Metacritic because they're not part of the reviewer class. But on Steam, you get at least a little bit of a say, right? So I think Steam reviews are definitely better than Metacritic. But I would say the thing we talked about earlier, the one thing that I do really miss about the old style game reviews is we did not have this collectivization of reviews, this gamification of reviews, where like for example, Billy Joe has Gaming Mag Super 1000. That's the name of his, and he gives the game a 1 out of 10. In the past, his 1 out of 10 score only affected Gaming Joe and his magazine. It did not affect this greater network of some sort of thing. And then, like you said, you're actually worried about the granularity of review scores because you're worried about how they would come together in this pooling type of system. But I would say the bigger problem is that we have the pooling system in the first place. I think if we didn't have a Metacritic and instead you had to as a player decide whose voice you valued more, I think that would go a lot more of a long way. So if you as a player felt like this reviewer really knows my tastes, this reviewer really knows my value set in game design and really has a thumb on the pulse, I'm really going to listen to him. And I really value his score. In the past, I think that was a much better system. But the problem with it now is in Metacritic, let's say you have an outsider opinion. Let's say your opinion does not match up to the collective Steam review. Like I liked Wanted Dead, for example. I gave Wanted Dead a positive review, so that would be an example. I would say Wanted Dead, if you're looking for certain things that I value as a reviewer, it's there in a way that a lot of other games don't have, but it also is lacking things that if you care about certain things, you will not have a positive impression of the game. But I have a specific taste, I have a specific value set, and Wanted Dead happens to fall into that. But the problem is that on Metacritic, you cannot be an outsider taste maker type of critic anymore, because now you have to answer to the gallery of, like, for example, if you had a really valid reason for not liking, what was Breath of the Wild? Like, let's say you had this you really valued the older style of Zeldas or something, and you had a lot of valid critiques of Breath of the Wild. When Breath of the Wild came out, I remember Jim Sterling, 7 out of 10, caused like insanity, caused all kinds of backlash because of the Metacritic implications of the score. And I think that's the problem with these types of systems is, for example, I don't want to be on Metacritic. Like, Bog has asked me, hey, you could like put up a website and put your reviews on there and then you could be on Metacritic. I'm like, no, because it removes your ability to be an outsider critic, because now I am, like, for example, Vampire Survivors, I would have a very critical review of that, but it's because I have a certain view set that does not align with the mainstream tastes of bullet hells and these types of games. And so people who like my style of critique, like the way I view games and the way I talk about games, that review is really going to connect with them. But if you're Billy Joe Vampire Survivor 69, my review is going to piss you off. And I don't want to piss you off. I don't want to talk to you. I just want to talk to my audience. I don't want to talk to Billy Joe 69. I just want to talk to my audience. But Metacritic does not allow that, because Metacritic will pull you into a mass audience. So I think that's why we have all of this like insanity around review scores of like, oh, how could Joe give Dragon Age a 2? Damn you. And then another guy gives it like a 10. It's like, that's not right either. And then the guy who gave it a 10 was like, oh, I just gave it a 10 because the other guy gave it a 2. And I had to like make up for his score. You know, it starts to turn into insanity.
Yeah, my thesis though is these reviews don't really matter much. Like these Metacritic reviews, like the critics, I don't think they really matter. I think people don't really look at them very much to decide what game to buy. I think what you were talking about, Mark, the people want to know, like, from people they respect or who have tastes that align with theirs, or I think this is basically where you have the new kind of thing, and it's not a review, but it's just streamers playing the game when it comes out. And you have a streamer, he or she likes the kind of game that you like, and then you decide whether you're going to play it based off that or not. Now, sometimes they go on to make a review, but a lot of times they don't. And
I call
think
that like
that's
the influencer, sort of the influencer power. Yeah.
But it's very similar to what you're talking about, right? Because it's got, like, do you like this person's taste? The only thing it's really not is it's not condensed, right? Like, it's not like a sound bite, really. It's like you kind of have to go watch for an hour and skip. Like, I'll actually do that. I'll go watch somebody play. I don't want to watch them play for 2 hours, but I'll go skip through, like, look at different parts, and I'll be like, okay, this looks kind of cool. Okay, let's skip forward, look at this. And I'll be like, be okay. And that's like another data point. And is this something I want?
I would say, though, the difference of like the influencer type thing, which is a new and a like really powerful aspect of games and how games are discussed and marketed. Absolutely. It's like a new branch kind of. But the difference between with like a formal review and a sort of influencer style review is an influencer doesn't necessarily need to have a continuity of taste that's like really rigorous. They can kind of go more off of like feel, impulse. Am I connecting with the game? But that's also subject to a lot of the same forces that Steam reviews are subject to, that a lot of reviews are subject to. Like, imagine you're a streamer, right? And you're playing Tekken 8 and you fire it up and you're like, oh yeah, this is kind of cool and everything. And then a bunch of your people in chat are like, dude, did you know about the issue with the stage? And you're like, what? And they're like, did you know, like, they charged for the stage? And then you're saying, oh my God, they did? And so it's not a one-way street. Like, not only will the influencer affect their audience, the audience will affect the influencer too. If the influencer goes on and the audience is like, dude, what's wrong with you? He'd be like, whoa, okay, sorry, I didn't know. So it's, that's another thing that doesn't make influencers quite the same thing as like a critic either. Like, they're less formal, so they're also more subject to the shifting tides of public opinion as well.
They're also bought off a lot of times. You know?
Exactly.
Yes.
And
it's like not even, nobody's even trying to hide it.
There was an interesting...
No,
I mean, they don't.
That was a big thing with like Street Fighter 5. When Street Fighter 5 came out, a lot of the guys, like the big fighting game guys, and you know what's interesting is sometimes it almost would be nicer if it was more Machiavellian. Like, the streamer was literally like getting paychecks in the mail from the developer, and the developer's like, dude, push the game. I almost think that would be nicer because it would be more clear and solvable. You could just be like, don't do that. But the problem is that a lot of this stuff is more soft in terms of the way these incentive structures work. I think this happened with fighting game players, for example, because in Street Fighter 5, how many of the top fighting game guys, you know, Street Fighter 5 famously a nightmare, but how many of those big mainstream guys were getting like directly sent checks by Capcom? Probably very few, but a lot of their careers depended on Street Fighter 5 working.
Yes.
If that game bombed, their career went with it. And a lot of streamers and a lot of influencers have this problem as well, is like, if they become really connected to a brand, like, I am the Monster Hunter guy. This channel is the Monster Hunter channel. And let's say, I'm just bringing Monster Hunter because it's like a really popular game, but let's say in the future, some Monster Hunter comes out and it's like a big problem. Those influencers are now put in a really tricky situation where they're like, all right, so if I just start slamming Monster Hunter, not only how will that damage my sort of career prospects in terms of working with Capcom, but how much will that damage my career prospects with my own audience?
Well, you see this happen.
And so that's...
Lucid will remember, because Lucid plays this game, but Warhammer 3, Total War Warhammer 3 came out, and it was a bit like, it was so hyped, but they put so much into the marketing. The marketing was absolutely amazing. I was so fucking hyped for this game, and I don't get hyped for games. I've learned not to over the years, but I couldn't help but get infected by how clever the marketing was. It was really good. They did so well to make it look good. And man, all the influencers, they were going on about how great the game was, but they were like, we're not allowed to review it until a week after thing. And then a whole bunch of them a week later said, yeah, sorry guys, it's not actually that good, it's kind of shit. I'm like, what the fuck, why don't you fucking say something then? I'm like, well, you know, because we're on the CA creator program, and Creative Assembly will kick us off the creator program, basically. Yeah. So, and there might even be like NDAs and crazy shit happening with that. And what happens is that there are a few, like you'll see this in the fighting game community, there are a few guys who have turned on Tekken completely, and now their channels are basically they have to turn their channel into either politics channels or channels that are about, hate clicks. So it's either that or they're basically slagging off Tekken. Oh, Tekken, look at how crap Tekken is. Now look at what it's doing. All nuance kind of goes out the window.
Yeah, you know what's messed up about that? Is then you can actually reverse it. So you start off, like, that's what I'm saying. The problem with this sort of thing is, like, because there's so much like public interaction influencer thing, you don't have the freedom to sort of move with nuance through these spaces. Like, for example, let's say you hard pivot your channel against Tekken. You're like, all right, Tekken, and so then you can't like hard pivot back to Tekken either. Let's say a patch came out. I don't think this happened with season 2.
Yeah, fixes everything.
Let's say it's just like, I don't think this happened with season 2, but let's hypothetically say season 2 comes out and they just like, it came together. They sat in the offices in Namco and they're like, oh my God, I see it. I see the problem. And like season 2 comes out and it's like amazing and all of the problems are fixed. I don't think that happened, but let's say if it did, you as like the Tekken hater guy, you're like, shit, what do I do now? Right.
I think I think if you have some charisma, people will follow you. Like if you hate it, slammed on them and they fixed everything and then you get like really excited and you're like hyped, I think people actually respond to that.
Yeah, maybe.
I think the thing, some people get a little too in their own head where they're like, oh, I have to have like this brand or I have to say the same thing every time. And it's actually, as long as you show examples, I think people will follow you, I think people like fence sitting, like being lukewarm on everything, people don't love, Like I think it was a thing that we saw it like with the latest Civilization release. There were some fence sitting reviews, and I think people kind of didn't like that.
That's the long term. That's the long term goal, though. Like the long term play. If you're playing for the long game, play in that way is the way to play. Because, like, if you're an influencer and you're really erratic, you're hot, you're cold, you're hot, you're cold, you will become a joke at some point because people will start to see, all right, this guy is just volatile. He's all over the place. And the guys like Maximilian Dood's such a great example of this. Maximilian Dood is like, he's much more on the positive side.
Yeah.
And when he's negative, he's very measured. He's very careful. He's very careful. And he's been able to like hang in there way longer than a lot of these other influencer guys because he knows when to go in on the hype and then he knows when to like very surgically be critical, like a scalpel coming in here. And you'll notice that people who tend to move forward in the industry are those types. Like the guys that the developers look at and they're like, okay, this guy might be a bit boring, but he's reliable. We can count on him. He will hold it down. He won't cause too much ruckus. So if you just look at it in terms of like engagement, sure, like jumping back and forth, that gets tons of engagement.
Developers definitely don't like that.
No, they don't.
Developers are not going to like that guy, but I think the audience will follow you. But the problem is the developers, you're not going to be on the early access. You're not going to be on the beta. You're not going to be, touching these things early.
Can I give a quick example?
I mean, I think,
like Lucid, you mentioned Civilization 7. There was an influencer who he put out a couple of videos and he used some clickbait title like "This is the best game ever, 10 out of 10, thumbs up." And then he did another video saying "This is the worst game ever, 1 out of 10, thumbs down." Right?
Yes.
And now he did that to cover his back.
We all know who this is.
We all know who this is. Now,
I don't.
Let me just say, I don't follow this. My personal opinion would be
it has to do with whiskey.
As a publisher, if I saw that. What you don't realize is that YouTube, well, you probably do realize it, YouTube and social media in generally promotes negative content. Okay, that is what the algorithm sort of has learned to push. So the first video I saw of that was the thumbs down one. Now, if anybody knows anything about psychology, will understand how powerful, and persuasion, how powerful a first impression is. It's incredibly persuasive on a subconscious level. If you see someone that you trust say something sucks, but it's just a joke, and he put a thing in his video saying, "Oh, it's only a joke. There's only 2 videos." Doesn't matter. The damage is done. Now, I saw that working in marketing, and I was like, "Oh boy." Oh boy,
Yeah, we're past irony.
I would hate to be.
We've gone right past irony.
Yeah, we've gone past irony.
Ironic. You can't do parody or irony because it's impossible to tell the difference because things are so exaggerated now.
Yeah.
I thought a lot about that. Like, oh, wouldn't it be fun
if I did almost twice the reviews or the views.
And look at that. So I know, right? So looking at this, just from a little bit of experience, I can tell you that is bad for the publisher. That is really bad. And if I'd have paid him to do that, I would be really pissed off. I would be I would be like, yo, dude, we're not giving you any more games.
That's as positive as he could be. The game was a mess on release.
Yeah, it was really.
That was as nice as I think he could be. Because if it was either this. He either had the option to be a total fence sitter and just say everything was okay and we hope it gets better. Or he could be like, oh, there's these great parts about the game, but there's also parts where it bombs hard. And that was sort of the way he went. I mean, I'm not sure I would have done it that way. But no. And he got shit for that too. People are like, this game is such a...
He didn't mean to. I know that. I don't think he intended. I don't think he knew. Like, I've read a bit about persuasion, like, because I'm interested in it. I think it's an interesting topic. So you need to know when people are using it on you, right? Mind control is really powerful. Mm-hmm. So I read a bit about it, and I tell you what, that bombardment of negative image from someone you trust, like, it doesn't matter what you say afterwards, it's that first impression, super important. He can then go on to do a video saying, oh no, it's just a joke, doesn't matter how, it's really, really good, but that is imprinted on 600,000 people's psychologies now, and that is subconscious. You can't do anything about it. That was a terrible move. Also, now, he didn't know he was doing that. I don't think he'd have done that deliberately. It's not really his fault, it's just ignorance, but that is the effect.
49% on Steam. This game was bombed. It was bad. It was the worst iteration on the series by far.
Oh yeah, and like Lucid said, I'm sure he tried.
There's no way. He's in this exact same problem we've been talking about. He has deep. Like, this guy's getting invited to their studio. Yeah. He's doing combined events. He's announcing tournaments. Yeah. He's deeply embedded, and this game comes out and it's steaming hot garbage. Maybe now a lot of civilizations aren't great when they come out and they get better over time.
This is standard.
But this one by far and away is off the scales bad for how bad it is when it comes out. And they're paying him. I don't maybe they didn't pay him. I don't think they did. I definitely don't want to say they paid him when they didn't. I don't think they actually did.
No idea.
But the soft connections are there. That's what I was saying earlier. Like, this is the difference between a critic and an influencer. So, like, a true critic. Right. Now, when I say critic, don't think of a game journalist, because that's not the type of critic I'm talking about. Think of, like, someone who reviewed books in the 70s or something. Like, a real critic. Think of a real critic, not a game reviewer. Like, a real critic would know this is a conflict of interest. A real critic needs to be separated from the industry. A real critic needs to be isolated from these factors, because otherwise, of course, you're going to be conflict of interest. Of course, there's going to be incentives that are going to be very hard for you to navigate through. If you're like a presenter for Civilization, I have no connection to Civilization, so I'm just going off what you guys said. But like, if you are connected to Civilization's development in any way, and its marketing in any way, and then you're presented with a game that in your heart is like, oh my god, this is bad. You are going to be put in just an ugly situation. Yeah. Whereas if you are,
this guy made two separate reviews.
I know. I think he was between a rock and a hard place, though. I don't mean to be mean about him. I think he just did what he could, and I think he did the best that he could with a bad situation. Because like Lucid, you're a Dominion. People know you for Dominions, right? Imagine if Dominion 7 came out and it was a hot, stinking pile of garbage. Now you are between a rock and a hard place, aren't you? Let's say that you don't do any of the content.
I almost think, though, the way around this is, if you understood, like this guy, for example, if he understood, I am not actually a critic. I may think I am, but I'm actually an influencer. That is my role. Then I almost think it would be more refreshing if these guys came out and said, listen, I'm not a critic. I'm an influencer. I obviously have some vested interest in this game's success, so I can't comment on its quality. I just have no objectivity here. I cannot comment on its quality. You guys need to decide that for yourselves, and I'm going to go back to my job and be an esports caster.
That's pie in the sky. This guy's whole channel is playing Civilization, and a new one comes out, and he's got to say what he thinks about it. There's no way he cannot say what he thinks.
That's the
everybody's going to want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm
I
saying.
think
If influencers were more self-aware of like, okay, I can say what I'm going to say about it, but I cannot be objective. I cannot be objective about this game's quality because I have this conflict of interest. So I can only give to you my view, but just know this view has a conflict of interest because I'm connected to the game. I think just being more open about that.
A good reviewer should do that. That's as a matter of course. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, they have. Yeah, I have to do it. If I get a free key for a game, and I will always say, hey, I got this key for free. Or like, if I do a let's play of like Galciv, which is a Stardock game, and I work for Stardock at the moment, I have to disclose that. I always do. I'm like, by the way, just so you guys know, I actually work for the company. So take everything I say about the qualitative aspects of this game with a grain of salt, because my bread and butter depends on it. So but knowing that going forwards, let's get on. And I always do that. So every single time.
You could even say like, this is the company trying to show you our vision of the game and like what we think's good about it, but it is not objective, obviously. Like this is coming from it's like part of sort of trying to outreach to the players, but it's more related to marketing than independent critique. I think if we just start to identify like these lines because you do a review, but is that review independent critique or is that review part of marketing? Are you an influencer? I think if everyone had
here's the thing.
Self-awareness for their role and their connection to what they're talking about, it would be a lot less ugly and messy than what we're seeing now, where it's like, it's,
well, let's define that in a way, because I think if we look at the challenges of making a review, to be like a relevant reviewer, you have to put your review out close to when the game comes out, which usually means you need a review copy, and it's very hard to get away from. Yeah,
not necessarily. You have to pony up the cash. There's that. Oh, you mean like early access? You mean early access?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
yes.
To make a high quality good review where you've got like 40 yhours in it, either you have to be a madman and just play it nonstop for like 4 days.
Yep. Yes.
Reading all the community threads, seeing what people say, testing things out, then spend the next 3 days doing a review, and you have something out in the first week that will be relevant.
That right there.
I don't want to do that.
What you described right there, though, is actually what an independent critic would have to do. I do this myself.
Yeah.
You have to, if you want to be an independent critic, this is the price you must pay. That is exactly what I have to do. I have to like lay out my week and be like, listen, the game's coming out. I can't do anything for 4 days because I have to get it the second it comes out and just play it for 4 days straight. I do think that is the price you do have to pay if you want like critical objectivity. Because anything else, if you start getting the early access, you start getting in sort of the system, then you're losing that independent. You're losing it. You're going to lose it. Well, the industry is stepping away. They will not allow it.
Think of the price of this too, because like I agree with you, that's what you have to do. But think of the price, not only just in terms of like the personal price. I'm not asking you to think about that. That's obvious. But like most people are going to decide in the first week whether they're going to buy the game or not, and your review is not going to be relevant for that at all. Because it's going to probably take at least a week, especially if you make a high quality review. It'll probably take you 2 or 3 weeks if you're playing it and doing it.
Yeah, what you have to end up doing is like what I said earlier: is you cannot compete with IGN. You cannot compete with these insider access guys because they had the game 3 months ago, and they can message the developer and be like, "Bro, what do I do here?" And the developer's like, "Oh, here, let me help you." Like they just have a level of access that a independent critic cannot match. You will not be able to compete with them. So your only option is you have to establish your own audience that trusts you, and they have to sit around and be like, all right, the review's coming, and they have to just wait. Like that's the only way to do it. You have to establish a trust with your little audience, and they're just going to be like, all right, any day now, it's coming.
And what are they watching while they're waiting? They're watching IGN, and then they get that imprinted. Like I was saying.
Yes, yeah.
I think
it's tough. I think the odds are stacked against independent critique. I think the odds are really stacked against independent critics.
Yeah, I think the thing is because you can't really compete for this like week of release review where your review's actually relevant to people buying the game. because you can't really compete there. And even if you do like 2 weeks later, it's probably not that relevant. I think the spot for this is this.
Algorithmically,
Yeah,
isn't, right?
You're just not that relevant, you know. I think the thing where these types of reviews are irrelevant is this idea of like review as art. But we've been talking about art some. In some ways, you can say like the game is a work of art. When I say this, I mean the review is a work of art. So
yeah, I agree.
There's probably like 3 or 4 YouTube channels. Like Mandalore Gaming's a great example of one. Never Knows Best sort of does it.
Yeah.
There's a few of them. It's sort of like the cinema essay, but for video games, right? Where they're like, you know, the production values are super high. They're really reviewing all the things. But they're also not. It's not like what is it? Total Biscuit or something, where it's like this super methodological looking up. Like where we have to sit with him and go and look at all the settings options, you know, like he wants to like really be methodological. Yeah, people love that.
I love that guy. I love that guy.
But yeah, I mean, his reviews were special. They also are, I think, in the category of the review as a form of art. You know, they're not early access a lot of times. They were.
Yeah, and he was one of the early guys that was like, you know, like the options menu. To me, I actually think that's so important. Like he was actually looking at games more structurally, and he was looking at like, I remember when he reviewed Dead or Alive 5 and he was talking about all the issues with like the VSync and the options. I was like, this guy's going for it. I really respect that. And I do wish we we had that kind of voice in a more like because he was also popular. That he's like a rare creature where he was really getting in there.
Everyone liked him.
A fellow Brit. He was really getting in there, but he was also popular. And that's such a tough combo to find.
And I think the way to do these is you just have to, I think these you can't compete on time at all, and you just have to have this thing that like people don't. I think here's the distinction between these. I think is people don't watch your review to decide if they're going to buy a game. You just have to let go and give up on that idea. That's not why you're doing it. People watch your review just because they want to see how you think about any given game. They want to watch it like the same way they want to go watch a movie. You know,
I agree completely. And I actually agree completely. And I think a true critic should never I'm really hardcore about criticism, obviously. A true critic should not ever view themselves as part of the marketing wing of a game. You should be, like you said, you should be creating your critique as a work of art, as an expression and an analysis of a work of art. You should not be sitting there thinking, oh, I'm going to get more games sold, or I'm going to get less games sold. That's the job of a marketer and an influencer. The job of a critic is to discuss how is the game as a work of art. And so I agree completely. You shouldn't worry about that. You should not worry about how you're affecting the sales of a game with your critique.
Right. But like IGN could never do that, because if they release something 2 months after the game comes out, nobody cares. Like that their whole thing is like being relevant to people making decisions buying games. So you have to, that's a big thing to give up on. But I think
they're marketers. IGN are marketers.
Yeah.
They're not critics.
Yeah.
Their whole MO is all about that. Like it's not even like you have to sort of like look through the deep documents of IGN. IGN like are very open about how they view their role in the gaming industry as like marketers, tastemakers. They set the tone. They affect the sales. They affect how the game is received. They now own all of game journalism, essentially. Like, yeah, it is. Well, it is a beast.
Kind of. I mean, it's like owning like a bunch of empty bank accounts. Like,
I don't think so, because it seems that way in terms of like on the streets of the gamers. Like if you're on the streets and you're talking to your friends, yeah, IGN's kind of a joke. But where it's not a joke is in the world of business, in the world of financing, in the world of what gets made, what doesn't get made. I mean, they have insane power in that area.
I don't know.
Which is why they're able to like own all the shit. Like they own all the games.
But like think about it. The thing that matters is, are they able to sell games? And I don't think they are. Like there's a lot of these games that they've been pushing lately that just don't really sell. You know,
I think I agree exactly what you mean. Let me explain what I mean. It's like, I agree with you completely. Like if IGN decide that they like, let's say IGN decided they liked a new shmup or something, and they made a video about it, that will do nothing. But what IGN have the ability to do is if they don't like your game, like they don't like Wanted Dead, they don't like a certain game, because they basically run Metacritic, they can really cause your game a lot of problems, because that low IGN score, that then like...
What's an example of this? Because this
is like a credit rating.
Wanted Dead.
See it as a credit rating.
Wanted Dead's
no, but it had the
example of that.
No, but it had the same one on Steam. We already looked at it. Steam's the exact same. People actually didn't like this game that much.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying, is that these effects are really more interlinked than you think, because when you set the tone, that sets, like we said earlier, like if you come into a game, let's say you come into a game and the game has 40% right when you show up, that sets a tone in your mind of, oh, this game's got problems. Versus if IGN decides, you know what, we're giving this game a 10 out of 10 and all the other game journalists get a 10 out of 10, that then sets the tone for that game, which then goes everywhere. It goes into social media, it goes into Steam reviews. All of, like, look at Tekken, for example. Tekken 8 on launch had really strong reviews. Like, Tekken 8 on launch had extremely strong Metacritic, extremely strong reviews from IGN, extremely strong Steam ratings. And it's only as it went on that those issues started to arise. But IGN have a lot of power at setting the tone for your game when it comes out. They can set the tone, and they say, this is a masterpiece. That spreads outward. And it's, like I said, it's not just like this very direct handshake type of thing. It's this soft influence that spreads and moves and stuff like that.
I'm not so sure, because there's a lot of negative reviews in this first one. I don't know what the percent is. Oh, no, it is 90%.
At launch.
Okay.
At launch.
At launch, it was 90. Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't until Tekken 8 got past that critical window and started adding in DLC shops and adding in all this stuff. But that initial tone was very strong, and that is just something you will see a lot. Is IGN do have a lot of influence, but it's not this direct like they can just make a game happen. It's more of like they really affect the tone and the conversation around a game. Like, what was the game you guys were talking about earlier that you thought was kind of bad or something?
Warhammer 3 was one, and the other one was Civilization 7.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me see.
What were those review scores like for Civilization? And I have no connection to these games. I don't know anything about them. Sorry.
Warhammer 3, I think, what did Metacritic say about that? Oh, God. I'll have to Google it.
Yeah, I'll look too.
I think you're making an important point, though, Mark. Sorry, go on, Lucid.
So this is an interesting one. I have a separate window up. I've been Googling which games did IGN give bad reviews that actually got good reviews on Steam. Because we're all I feel like everybody who's a gamer is super familiar with the case where IGN does a puff piece on some big corporate game that sucks.
Yeah.
Yes.
But this one's a little more hard to think, because a lot of times IGN will do like milk toast.
I do
Sins of a Solar Empire 2. They're one of our games. They did that too.
Gungrave Gore.
So they gave it like.
Gungrave Gore.
Sorry.
So Gungrave Gore was an example of this, where it got a pretty low IGN review, but its target audience, the Gungrave fans, really liked it. So it'd be interesting to see how that ended up.
Yeah, let's look. So it got a 6 on IGN.
Yeah, that I thought was really unfair. So let's see what the funny thing also about IGN is, like, they, with like bigger games, they're very careful with those negative review scores. It's only like these like smaller AA single
73.
Games hammer.
73 is not too bad.
So there you go. But look at the initial. Wait.
They under-reviewed it, but not by a huge amount.
Let's look at the initial. Okay. I'm curious. Because Gungrave Gore has kind of, over time, gotten credibility from the fans and from the players. But let's see how it initially launched, what the reception was.
All right.
Well, on this topic, one of the games that I was helping with, IGN gave it.
I'm getting technical things.
IGN gave it a really low score, and I suspect it was a political reason why they did so. And then they got absolutely wrecked in the comments by people saying, "No, have you actually played this? Because you don't even look like you've even played this." And then the game came out, and it's got really high scores on Steam, so it just kind of made them look really stupid.
Play anything.
Yeah, because our company's not like a AAA company or anything, they feel they can get away with giving you a low score if they don't like the guys who've made it, basically. And I think my personal opinion is that I suspect that was what was behind that. I got a problem with somebody.
They just don't appreciate certain like styles of games. Like they don't appreciate more like arcade influenced action games. Over time they've gotten better about that. But historically, infamously, God Hand, right? Infamously. And I remember, but this is before Steam reviews, but I remember Mikami himself said IGN like really damaged that game's reputation.
Yeah.
But obviously, this was a little bit more in there.
Since when is Metacritic? Since when is IGN doing points? A 5.9? Am I crazy?
This is
They're such a finely tuned review machine. They're giving tenths of points. What the fuck?
Yes. They don't even have a set.
What does that mean?
For the past few years.
They don't really have a sort of set score system either. It's not like they've got, graphics 1 out of 10, sound 1 out of 10, gameplay, mechanics. They don't do that. I think it's just kind of like they've just put a few extra decimal points on someone's arsehole opinion.
That's so funny. Steam.
Okay,
is like,
so this is taking a while to load. I can't find the.
Try refreshing it. Maybe it's just like it's like stuck.
I did. It's kind of.
It's not working.
It's because we're
I do it while we're waiting for it to load. Alien Isolation. So 5.9, a very precise review.
Yeah.
It for Steam it got 92%.
Yeah.
For Steam,
when did it come out?
Reviews. This was a game people liked.
When did Alien Isolation come out though?
2014.
Originally.
A surprisingly long time ago now. 2014.
Yeah, because if it was like one of those ones where it came out on like a console and then sort of built an audience and then came out on Steam, sometimes those IGN reviews are those like outliers where there's like I remember they did one of like one of the Guilty Gears. They gave kind of a low score, but it was like the Wii version, right? So it's like the Wii version of Guilty Gear, sure.
So I think this is the question to follow through on this, because the thread we're pulling is like, how much power do these guys actually have? So if we look at like Alien Isolation, how did this game sell? This game sold like hotcakes. I mean, holy shit. 2 million plus sales. Let's see what the production budget was.
When did Alien when is that IGN review score? Is it prior to the Steam version?
Let's see if we can find out.
This one came out so far ago. I wasn't even playing games at this point. I was on a hiatus from gaming.
Because actually, this could be an example of what I'm talking about, where there was an era where IGN just really disliked a certain style of game design, and they were just like God Hand and stuff, and they were just like hammering them. And then over time, the audience is like, guys, this stuff is awesome. Like God Hand IGN had to do like a full reversal for God Hand, where they gave God Hand like a 4, and then years later they're like, sorry bros, we don't mean that. So if the Alien Isolation one is one of those ones where it's like an older review and then the game comes out on Steam, that might be the disconnect happening there, versus a more current one where it's like IGN review, then the game comes out on Steam that week or whatever.
Okay, so people seem to think it cost 90 million, and if it's sold, say 2.5 million, and what was the price? The price is $40. So that's 40 times 2.5. Oh man, so that game might have just barely broken even.
Yeah, they do the Total War.
It's like 100 million.
They do the Total War games as well, though, so they were quite happy, I think. This was a side project for them, I believe.
Yeah.
Although they then went on to make Hyenas, which they built a whole new studio for, invested, was it 200 million, and then just cancelled it because it was garbage. Nobody wanted it. So they kind of messed up. But that's another story.
The other thing about Alien Isolation that I'd be remiss to not mention is that the Metacritic score...
Does it say the year of the review?
Updated 2000, posted on 2014, yeah.
Okay, so this is one of the ones where it was a Steam game, they gave it a low score, and then it sold well, or it didn't sell well?
It sold really well. I
It
think.
sold pretty well. Like it didn't lose money.
Okay.
It didn't. We don't know how much it cost. They made $100 million making it. That was probably close to the revenue.
Yeah,
I don't know what their production budget was, but
because look up Mikami's comments on IGN, because he said that he felt the IGN review of God Hand like severely damaged the sales of that game. That actually closed Clover Studios.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
well, when did God Hand come out?
That was in their more golden era. So that was the PS2 era.
Oh, that's a while ago then.
Yeah. I think the influence of IGN has waned in the world of like Steam. It's definitely waned, but I don't think it's like zero. I think it still has a lot of influence.
I think they set they set the level of all the other interactions that go on around games, though. Don't you? I think you were alluding to this, weren't you? It's like they will come in, do their review, and then there's a whole kind of culture of critic or reviews, whatever, that is kind of like adjacent, that reacts to it. Exactly.
Yes.
So if you imagine, they set the level of the goo in the petri dish, so to speak.
Oh, you want a fun one? You want a fun one?
I think they used to. They used to. I don't think they do anymore. Like Alien Isolation, despite giving a bad review, they didn't sync this game.
No.
But going back to God Hand, which was probably 6 or 7 years before this, they might have.
Yeah. But I do think
today, I don't think anybody flinches.
I think it's like, it's more of like, you also have to, I don't know about Alien Isolation, so I don't know, is this a big mainstream game? Is it a game with like a big audience?
It was, I don't know, it was pretty big. It was pretty big. It's a first person game.
I mean,
where,
it's Alien.
Yeah,
it's also Alien.
It's an Alien game. It's a
horror game.
It's a horror game, and it's well known for having quite good AI. Believable AI. I think is probably a better way of putting it. So you're on a ship. You've got to escape from the broken ship. The damaged ship, and the alien hunts you. And you have to creep around. There's broken robots, and it's kind of like a retelling of the original Alien, I guess. Very, very good game. Well, pretty good game. I think it's got flaws.
A more nuanced way to sort of understand it is like there's sort of a status multiplier here, where it's like the bigger your game has in terms of marketing and established audience, the less IGN can influence it. But with like these smaller ones like Wanted Dead, Gungrave Gore, if they don't have a big audience championing for it, I think the effect is stronger. Same with God Hand, obviously, in the past. Like, I think
that's how it used to work. It doesn't work that way anymore.
I think it does. It's just not as like sharp as it once was. It used to be like really sharp. I think now it still happens, but it's more softer and a little harder to. It's not like completely 1-to-1, but it's also not zero. It's not like if a game comes out and IGN gives it a negative score, it definitely has an effect. It's just how much of an effect that has.
Well, it didn't really affect. It didn't affect Sins of Solar Empire 2. Because like Sins of Solar Empire 2 came out, IGN gave it a very, very lukewarm score. It was like 50. I can't remember what it was now. It was maybe a 6 or something, a 5 or a 6, which it was an unfair score. I feel they got a bit confused about a few things, let's say, and yet the game sold very well on Steam, so it actually ended up doing really well. But their review was pretty. Yeah, look, they gave it a 5.
Oh my
and
God.
if you look on Steam, the reviews are, I think, something about 80% at the moment, something like that. So much better. This is a smaller game, I guess, but still, yes, 85%.
Wow.
So IGN, and they kind of got ripped. Like they were deleting comments on the on their own page, like they were critical of the review, and then they deleted a load of comments off their YouTube channel as well to kind of try to firefight it a little bit, because they got a lot of pushback over that. And that was obviously one I was following because it's a Stardock release game. And so I was kind of like, oh wow, they really tried to do a number on us there, and it didn't work, which was really quite lucky. So I think that there's some merit, at least just in my own personal experience with this one, there's some merit to suggest that I think that they don't have the power that they used to. And I think if you've got Sins has got quite a strong community. It's the original Sins of a Solar Empire Rebellion. There was still something like 3,000. They still had a fairly regular amount of players playing multiplayer and modded versions of the game, even sort of 12 years after the release of the game. So it had really strong community, and that really helped. I think
that helps massively.
But those numbers.
That's what I was saying. If your game doesn't have like a really established audience, that's where the effect is stronger. Like Gungrave Gore doesn't have a big established audience. Like some people remember Gungrave, but it's a smaller series.
Yeah, I've
And so
not
I
heard
think
of
the
it,
effect
to be
is
honest.
stronger. Wanted Dead is a brand new game. What everyone was kind of like, what's going to happen with this one? So that one, I think, had a stronger effect. I think, especially if you have like an audience for a game that's active and engaged, their effects are weaker. It's like more of the smaller games that end up taking the bigger stray hits than like big games, because those already have an audience.
We're gonna do it. Let's look at this. Concord is
that the canceled game?
We're gonna go there.
Yeah, let's go there.
This is the canceled. This is. Oh, did they not? They didn't even have time to rate. I thought they did rate it. Wait, did they pull their review? One second.
They might have done.
I don't think. Didn't the game?
They rated it.
It did come out, but no, it came out and then they
it was out for like 2 weeks.
2 weeks they canned it. Very expensive game, I understand.
Yeah, I heard that too.
A very, very expensive game. Not as I think I was talking about Hyenas, the one by Creative Assembly who did Alien Isolation. That was an expensive game. That was so expensive. My understanding is, Creative Assembly they had like 900 employees, which is insane, by the way, for a games developer. To put it into perspective, when I was working at Eurocom, which was one of the biggest developers in the UK at the time, they were Creative Assembly were just a twinkle in the eye at that point back in 2002. But Eurocom, I think there was about 130 or 140 people there. And that was a big we had our own motion capture studio. That's how big it was, and we only had 140 people. So that puts into perspective how big Creative Assembly were when they shut down Hyenas if they had 900 employees, because that's crazy. That's a lot of money they got to make in order to feed all them staff, or pay all their staff.
I think in some ways this is the best example of IGN not having any relevance or power. They gave this game a 7, which is good. I like 7s.
That's the classic meme, though, isn't
pretty good game.
They always
the
give it
IGN 7s are like essentially neutral. IGN 7's like it's a game. It exists.
But this game spontaneously combusted after getting this review. Not because of this review, but because people were like, no, this game is actually bad.
I definitely agree. IGN do not have the power to make a game powerful. I'm saying I think they still have the power to damage a game. They can't lift a game, but I think they can damage a game.
Well, let me share my thing on how I think. So if you're making a game and you want to get it released, you have a few windows. And this is a little off topic, but you have not that much. Your first window is early access. Your second is when you do your first release. And then if you do like big sales and stuff, you have more windows. So you can like give the game away for free for a weekend. And basically, the way Steam looks at games is the same way YouTube looks at YouTubers, and that they have a limited number of impressions to give on a store page. And if people click on that, then if they buy it, then, and especially if it makes a lot of money, like it's actually good to have your game cost some money on Steam, because Steam's going to get a bigger cut, so they want to show your game more. But if people are clicking through and buying it, then they're going to keep showing it. So when you do your early access release, you need to have it in such a state that the people who play it, or the people who see the icon for it, are going to buy it. And after that window only lasts like 3 days. And that window, they're just going to show it to people. And then after that, based on how successful it was during that window where they're just showing it, then they're going to adjust it going forward. So you get like 3 free days, but even if you like patched it like day 3 after you release it, because there was a huge game breaking release, but you had 3 days of bad traffic, they're going to can it, So it's a mix of that, and you get people to play it, like streamers.
I was going to say
it's
really interesting how much YouTube and YouTube and Steam are parallels to each other these days, because YouTube videos work exactly the same way, where it has that initial release, and then the algorithm kind of like looks at it, checks it, and basically if the video is going to take off, it usually takes off within those first few days, and then if it doesn't, it will settle down into the dead zone of the algorithm, basically. And so that is like the 90% of case for videos, but every now and then, all of a sudden, an old video of yours will just be like, boom, it's in the algorithm. And I think you could probably see the same effect happening on Steam as well. Exactly. Like the launch of your game now is like it's like so important. There's no just
especially if you're a
let it-
small studio. Like if you don't have a big audience that's coming to you, if you fuck up that first 3 days when you do your initial release, like you're screwed.
Yeah,
You know?
that would tie into like what we're talking about too. Like let's imagine you have your little indie game, right? And you release it and you're in that 3-day window. In day 1, IGN gives it a 4 out of 10. That probably is going to filter into that ecosystem of the Steam reviews and stuff where people are like, yo, and then they might be repeating some of the things IGN critique. And then like Battle Mode said, and then within the ecosystem of the Steam reviews, it will go through there as well. So I think like negative review scores, especially because launches are so key, they can get in there and cause some problems. So I think this is also another reason why we see IGN being so... They're actually, in terms of being critical, they're way more just generally positive. Like you have to really piss them off to get a negative review score from them. Like it's a statement if IGN give you a negative review score.
I mean, honestly, they're so much of a meme at this point. It might actually be good to get a bad IGN review score and then have good Steam reviews, because then people will talk about it. They'll be like, "Oh my god, did you see this bad take IGN had?"
Yeah.
I don't know how long it's going to stay like that, but I think right now it might actually be a good strategy. Like if you could, like maybe you send some hateful email or something to the guy you know's reviewing your thing, like fish for that bad review.
It's interesting because I think it works in certain ways. Like if IGN criticize your game, like Wanted Dead, and basically the criticism for Wanted Dead is just, it's a mess, it sucks, I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a more damaging one because there's no like clear way to sort of backlash that. Versus if IGN makes some really arbitrary, really clearly unfair negative review, then you're right. Then what can happen is it can cause like this springboard backlash, and then it can like get your game kind of in the conversation.
But that's still...
Here's what I think. If you have a good trailer...
Sorry.
No, if you have a good trailer and it's in Steam and then people click it, and then, you know, because during the first 3 days, they're going to show it to people. And if people click it and they're like, oh, damn, I like this, and then they buy it, and then when they buy it, they leave a good review, like Steam is going to, it's just like YouTube. It'll just take it and run with it. Like people who are on YouTube and think that like, oh, the algorithm doesn't like me because, you know, it's unfair and I haven't pleased the gods. No, the algorithm knows. I mean, there's weirdness to it, right? But like, if you took like PewDiePie or I don't know, whoever big YouTube person, and you start them again from scratch and change their face so that you can't tell it's them, and change their voice so you can't tell it's them, they would hit it off. I mean, it would take a month or two, but they would catch the algorithm. Like these things are, you know, that's my opinion anyway. So like if you had a good game, you're not from a big studio, you have a good trailer and the game is fun to play, like Steam is going to take that and shoot it to the moon. That's my opinion.
I think the way it works, because there's a lot of sort of cases of this where when we see that happen, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like there's a lot of games that they kind of are these underdog stories, and we see those and we're like, oh yeah, that totally works. But because I'm on the YouTube side of things exactly the same way. Mm-hmm. There's videos I've made where I was like, oh, this is an amazing video, so well done, and I release it and it's just like an average or below average video. And then there's other videos I've made that I'm like my biggest video of all time, for example, is my Tekken 8 talking about like how to play neutral game in Tekken and everything. And when I was making that video, I was like, oh, this one is probably not going to do super well. It's kind of niche, me talking about spacing and sidestepping. But I think it's important just to get kind of established for people so that they know what to do when Tekken 8 comes out. That video explodes. I'm like, whoa. And then there's other videos where like my Mercenaries tier list, where I like so much research, so much analysis, like so much production. And it's just kind of like a below average video. And I know this happens with indie games too, though, where yes, there are indie games where you see them take off and it makes sense. You're like, of course. But there are also so many amazing indie games that just don't. They come out and they're like, essentially, yeah, they're sort of in the out. I mean, look at shmups obviously have.
I
This
think
problem, but
Vampire
even
Survivor is
other-
a good one, right? Because like you look at Vampire Survivor, this is not a game that some artistic critic is going to look at and be like, "Oh, this thing is amazing. It's the pinnacle of gaming." But nevertheless, it touched something. You know,
it was
like
cheap.
Yeah.
it's not a game.
It was a
I
cheap
would say,
game.
I would say, it's funny because I would actually, if someone showed me Vampire Survivors and said this game is going to be a hit, I would say, okay, I could see why. Because I was talking about the way it really, really hones in on using progression systems. And like, for example, when you like level up, there's like explosions and it uses a lot of sort of.
The guy who made it used to work at casino like slot machines.
Exactly.
This is not.
That's exactly
he actually
what I
did.
was gonna say. Yes, because it uses a lot of explicit gambling design. For example, the fact that in Vampire Survivors you don't have control over your attacks; they just go on like this automated thing. And speaking of friction, I want to give a shout out to my friend and game developer Boghog, who has been researching gambling game design and helped introduce me to this concept of friction, which I think is really important to understand, especially in the context of modern game design. So I just wanted to add in a quick shout out to Boghog. There's a concept in gambling design called friction. And the idea of friction is that when they design casinos, they don't want too many things and too many mechanics of the machines getting in the way of you accessing the machine. And so over time, the actual evolution of slot machines has changed to reflect this, where they have less like things that can, like less steps basically between you and gambling. And I could tell Vampire Survivors actually uses a lot of these concepts. It uses a lot of these gambling style game mechanic concepts. And so for me, I can completely see why that game exploded into what it became. But like you're saying, you have to kind of, it's a more of a crapshoot. That could have happened, that could not have happened. It happened to connect where it did, but
I think this, by the way, just
but I guess what I'm saying is
So sorry, Lucid. I'll let you finish. I just wanted to start transitioning us towards the end of the podcast at some point. But I do think that this is an important time. Well, this is a good opportunity for us to sort of talk about how both developer and player critique can actually affect games design itself, because I think this is, for me, a really interesting topic. And yeah, like for example, Vampire Survivors clearly uses mechanics in it that are kind of addictive, but they've also
gambling.
It's gambling. The other thing was it's a very cheap game. I think that you can't ignore the fact that it's a really cheap game. So it's like, oh wow, it's cheap, I might as well buy it. And then it's got very addictive stuff in it. So
cheapness would go along with the friction concept. You know, the entry price, the friction. You want low friction, so you keep it cheap.
But surprisingly not predatory.
Yeah. It's like
the gambling guy has.
I would say, like, in the sort of like spectrum of the insanity of predatory practices in like gaming, Vampire Survivors would not be in that tier of like, you know, the gambling mechanics and stuff. But I would also say it's a little bit more along those lines than something like a true bullet hell, like a Mushihime-sama. And so I'm a bullet hell guy. I don't know if you know that. Like I review and specialize in shmups and bullet hell games. And so the reason why Vampire Survivors is on my radar is because it enters into that territory a little bit, and people talk about how it's the evolution of bullet hell design and stuff. And I'm like, no, it's doing something very different than a bullet hell game.
Yeah, it's when people talk about...
But if Vampire Survivors was like a card game or something, I personally wouldn't probably even interact with it or have much of opinion on it. But the fact that it kind of enters that bullet hell territory, and the marketing starts pulling from bullet hell, and it's advertised as a bullet hell when it's like not remotely a bullet hell in any way.
That's where I start getting annoyed. Like, for example, I'm a real fan of classic roguelikes, and I mean the original ASCII games like Rogue and NetHack and those, right?
Yes.
And you know, so for me, the definition of a roguelike is it like Rogue? If it's not like Rogue, it's not fucking roguelike. I've got a video on the way with this concept. So, for example, I really love the game Spelunky. I think Spelunky is a really good game, like a superbly designed game. but I don't, it's not a roguelike. And the fact that that a lot of these games are using this tag because the tag of roguelike sells games. It did for a long time, but it's so diluted what those terms now. People unironically will call Binding of Isaac or FTL or Spelunky or Vampire Survivors. They call them roguelikes, and it's also, nothing like it.
Yes, also Enter the Gungeon gets that as well.
Yeah. Enter the Gungeon. Anything with procedurally generated content with permadeath, any of the classic roguelike stuff, can get passed over. And so we start seeing these game, and it actually affects game design in a way, because what happens is, because developers, some unscrupulous developers who are more money oriented, I would say, they want to tick a box that says has procedurally generated content, has permadeath, so we can slap the roguelike tag on, and that has fundamentally altered game design. For example, anybody who plays CRPGs will have noticed ever since Minecraft and Dwarf Fortress before it, which is a kind of roguelike game, crafting is now in everything. Crafting has to be in every fucking game genre, whether it's 4X, in CRP. I can't, the Divinity Original Sin games are really, really good, but I can't stand the crafting in it. I hate hoarding disorder simulators. So if I've got to wander around a map and pick up bits of twigs, and it's just unless the game is built around that. For example, crafting works beautifully in Minecraft. That's a brilliant game. Crafting works brilliantly in Dwarf Fortress because it's built in, it's part of the core game mechanic. But if you slap that on as just to tick a box, this is really bad in 4X, and that's my speciality. Where they're just like, oh well, we need to have diplomacy, otherwise it's not a 4X. Knowing that diplomacy in these kind of strategy games is so abusable and really difficult to do correctly, it fights against the core game design. And so the need to have people go, oh well, to have the expectation of, oh, this is a roguelike game because we want to be able to sell it as that kind of thing, it's fundamentally changing how developers are approaching design. And they've gone less from art, kind of passion projects where people have really sat and thought about the design for 6 months and iterated the design out, jammed it out, into kind of, well, we've got to have this, we need to have that, oh, it's got to be easy for the first 2 hours because we've got to get people past the Steam refund window, it's got to have loads of cutscenes, all that kind of stuff. And so I think that's also, I've very, very quickly kind of summarized quite a large problem, I think, with, when it comes to what passes as critique these days, particularly in terms of Steam reviews.
I agree completely. And I've heard this explicitly stated to me that I've talked to guys who worked at studios, and they said they'd heard meetings where they would talk about games like this, oh, we're going to make a roguelike game because those are popular. So they have no connection to roguelike as a design philosophy, as a creation, what the tenets of roguelikes are, what the bounds are, what works. They're just using that genre as a marketing tool. Yeah. And that is happening with Bullet Hell right now. Games that have not a hint of Bullet Hell DNA in them are getting not only marketed as Bullet Hell, but even marketed as Bullet Hell is antiquated. This is the new Bullet Hell.
Yeah, that's the worst bit, isn't it? When they start getting patronizing about it, that's when you start getting...
Exactly. And it's oh, but it's part of marketing. It's not part of design. It's not like these guys are, because there are actually a lot of games within the Bullet Hell genre that are pushing the genre in interesting ways, doing new things. But those are not ones that are Bullet Hell is of the past. This is the newest, hottest stuff. And they don't tend to have these progression system stuff, because a lot of that stuff cuts against a lot of the fundamentals of Bullet Hell. Like an arcade game, a Bullet Hell game needs to be a fresh playthrough every single credit. Every credit must be a fresh playthrough. But with these roguelite games, I guess they're called, right, where they have that meta progression, there is no fresh playthrough, and they're not designed around that concept either. So like I said, if you start Vampire Survivors, nothing, fresh save on that first level.
I'm doing this right after we get off.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to beat the level in one go because you will not have the DPS to do it. But in a Bullet Hell, that would be considered not proper design, because Bullet Hell is around the idea that every save needs to be a fresh, equal playthrough, and that the whole balance of the game needs to be around the concept of being able to come in and once you see the game without grinding or without progression systems. So that's what we're talking about, is like the genre's credibility and its like what do you call it, like mystique, its reputation is being taken, and then it's being used to market things that aren't actually related to the design philosophy in the slightest.
Yeah. There was a roguelike. There was a game that was marketed as being a roguelike game because I think it was fundamentally iterated down into oblivion from classic roguelikes. And Seth Zintac did a video on it recently. It's called Path of Atra, and everyone was telling me, Ben, you got to play this game. It's like it's a classic roguelike. No, the game just plays itself. You hit one button and then it just zooms through the level and does like. And I was like, what the hell is this? Yeah, this is not a roguelike. It's got nothing. It's got some. It looks like a roguelike because it's kind of got tiles, and it has that that meta progression that you were talking about. Meta progression isn't a thing in classic roguelikes, by the way.
Nope,
they are
not. I know.
They are much more like bullet hell. They are supposed to be self-contained. Every time you start, they are complete. Like it's a new game. You don't have anything continued from the last run. You don't get any new abilities that you didn't have in the last one. That's a roguelite. Roguelites are completely different. That's some weird mutation, and some great games. Like I say, Spelunky's great.
It should be called. I was saying, it should be called a rogue unlike.
A rogue unlike, yeah. If it's not like rogue, it's not a fucking roguelike.
Because roguelite is so easy to confuse with roguelike. I was like, you need a stronger term. You need like rogue unlike. Yeah, it was also, I've been researching this too. The original Rogue actually had a scoring system.
Yes, it did.
So not only did it have permadeath, and not only did it have an arcade-like structure, it literally had scoring. So it was basically a PC arcade game, which is so cool. Which is completely different than the stuff we're seeing now in the roguelite.
So an adjacent issue would be that, for example, Path of Ashra was part of this kind of dumbing down of games design that I'm starting to see, where people. So there's a classic roguelike called Crawl. It then got taken over by the community and started becoming called Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup, and they were gradually removing elements like the RPG elements of older roguelikes to kind of make them a little bit easier to play. So stuff like if you walk into a door, it automatically opens, that kind of stuff. You don't need to test potions anymore. They don't like that because apparently it's time consuming. So they just kind of got rid of that, and everything's pre-identified. What they don't realize is as they strip down the game mechanics and make it easier to play, it fundamentally changes the experience that you have of the game. And I think that the natural progression of the roguelike into Path of Atra, which is where literally you hit a button, you kind of preset, you set your equipment, then you hit a button and then it just plays the thing for you. I don't want to play that kind of game, right? And I'm not saying that, it's like the slippery slope argument, and I think it's a little bit nebulous, but I feel that if we're not careful, I think these marketing terms, and coupled with this desire for everything to be easy, I think is really taking games design down a path that I really don't like, which is one of the reasons people are starting to complain, saying that I'm just stuck in the past. But it's a bit like, well, games kind of were better. I'm getting a bit off topic anyway, guys. But
I think there's a couple of things. I think one is like blending genres is, I think, totally cool.
Sure,
taking parts you like of one genre, blending them into something else.
I agree. Path of Atra is not a bad game. It's just not. Totally, it's not a roguelike. It's not a roguelike, and that's what bugged me. Right. It's like Vampire Survivors is probably a fun game, but it isn't a bullet hell. And that's when they pass it off as and when they pass it off as something else. I think, Lucid, that's where my mind starts to think, actually I feel a bit mugged.
Yeah, I mean,
now.
maybe we need a better word for it. But the idea of where dying is part of the game, and you have a meta progression from death. That's what most people associate with roguelike.
I do think that they need a new term, because with these sort of, it's one of those things where, like, to the average person, do these genre distinctions matter? Probably not.
No.
But like Battle Mode was saying, it does affect how the games are developed. That's where it gets really complicated, because let's say you approach Konami and you're like, I'm going to make a bullet hell. And Konami's like, you know what? We need one of those. Get us a bullet hell. And then you bring them, let's say, like a Mushihime-sama type of game, and they're like, the fuck is this? You're like, it's bullet hell. They're like, no, we wanted Vampire Survivors, dude. We didn't want this.
Yeah.
And so that's what you start to see is you're seeing this with roguelikes, right? Where now roguelikes are associated with meta progression.
Yeah, which is totally
fundamentally against their design.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, they should have their own distinctive terms, like their own distinctive identities.
Words are important.
And maybe in time, And maybe in time they will. Maybe this is something that in time it will be more publicly recognized. Okay, this isn't a bullet hell. It's its own thing. It's going to get its own name. But what's interesting is that, like, because we don't have a strong critical class, like, that would actually be the job of a reviewer, of a critic. A critic would actually come in and say, okay, everyone, bullet hells are like this. Roguelikes are like this. Roguelites or rogue unlikes are like this. And so then that creates that sort of literacy among players of the genre distinctions. But because we don't have a critical class that does these types of things, it just all gets thrown into a blender to the point where they have the Steam bullet hell sale and like Enter the Gungeon and Vampire Survivors are like right on the front page. It's like, wait, neither of these are bullet hell. Neither of these are shmups. Closing thoughts. Oh, good question. I guess I could start.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd say my closing thought is that even though we've pointed out a lot of the problems of game critique right now, a lot of the issues, I do think, like, I'm ultimately, as critical as I am, I'm ultimately an optimist in these areas. I just think what we need to do is we first need to get the conversation established, like set the groundwork of like, here's where we are, here's the problems, here's the issues we're facing, and then if that's more widely discussed and understood, then I am optimistic that as we move into the future, we will have a more robust and more informed review space that will distinguish itself from the marketing wing of the IGNs. I think that can happen in the future, but it's just going to be kind of a long journey to get there.
So I'd say that I kind of agree with that. I think that games, Lucid says something about, games critique as an art form. I think we need to focus back on that again. And it's really great. Like I was the editor for a site called Explorminate for a while, which was a fan site for 4X games, but it became quite an important voice in the 4X community, and we got the ear of a lot of developers actually. And so I think that organic things like that can make a real big splash in the gaming world, it's particularly in smaller genres. I think, in big AAA genres, it's going to be a little bit more of a difficult sell. Right. But like, particularly in niche stuff like your Bullet Hell, or I say niche, but particularly in smaller communities,
it's niche. Yeah. Bullet Hell is hella niche.
Yeah. Like Bullet Hells or arcade game, retro gaming, whatever it is, or roguelikes, classic roguelikes or roguelites, whatever. I think that fostering and developing these communities where people are encouraged to come up with these creative art form like critiques and create the kind of critic class, as you would say, Mark. I think that's going to be a good step forward. That's going to be a decent step forward, and I completely agree that separating it from influencers, not that there's any shame in being an influencer at all, but I think that having more of a separate delineation between those two things could be quite useful, because then people are going to be able to trust you more, in terms of like your credibility as a critique. I think is probably better separated from if you're actually working and selling a game. Lucid?
Yeah, I think that the mainstream gaming reviews and journalism are dead. I think there's no way, I think I've, not to bring up like a new game, but like before this, I was looking at Black Myth Wukong and trying to figure out why they gave it like an 8 instead of a higher score. Because it was like super popular. Tons of people played it. And they had like a bunch of issues, like the game was crashing all the time, they're like falling through the floor, and like of course you've got to review a game badly that's doing that. But then they fixed it and now those issues don't happen. So then it's like, or maybe you had a weird PC setup, so the thing is just a single person, even if you've got multiple computers you're testing one of these games on, games are going to change, your review's stagnant. It just isn't very meaningful. It just isn't. And furthermore, it's like super compromised by access journalism. I think it's just dead. I think the type of thing that Mark was talking about, where people want to figure out, does somebody like me, are they going to have fun playing this game? That's where you go to influencers. And that's got its own slew of compromises, but I think that just totally eclipses and replaces Steam reviewers in terms of like media assets that people go to look at for, are they going to buy a game or not? And I don't think there's really a way around it. And then Steam reviews fix all the holes that aren't with that. That they plug all the remaining gaps just about. And that if you want to see, if you watch the trailer and maybe you watch a little gameplay and you look at the Steam reviews, you're going to know that like pretty well, if you responded to that trailer, are you going to like it when you buy the game? So I think, mainstream games are dead. There's no coming back from, or mainstream game journalism is dead. There's no coming back from it. Influencers are still going to be a thing. Steam reviews still a thing. And then I think the thing that we've been talking about is the game reviews as an art piece. Hopefully we see more of this. I think channels that do that well tend to get like a lot of views. Yeah. But it's hard work, right? Like you're making maybe one video a month. Yeah. You know? And the video needs to be good. You know? And I think the other thing is like if people do it, it needs to be so that people who never play the game are still glad they never even thought of playing the game are still glad they watched the video. Yeah. Yeah. That's sort of how I see it.
Aesthetic. I agree. It needs to be aesthetic unto itself.
Like some of those games that never knows best at reviews. I don't have time for like a 40 or 80 hour CRPG, but they're so well done, and like it just, you get a good feeling watching the videos. Do you know what I mean? Like when you watch a good reviewer, if you come away entertained and feeling good, often you don't even need to play the game because you've kind of had that dopamine hit that you were looking for anyway. And that's not for me.
The one last thing kind of I'll add is a closing thing. It's just that we're in a world basically without gatekeepers now. There's no media thing that's gatekeeping. The only thing that's gatekeeping is this algorithm, and as long as you sort of understand how it works and you have a good product, like you can reach a huge market. Yeah. You know, it's you can, if you get in with some influencer or something, obviously it's going to be easier, but
yeah, that's a great point. I agree, we're post gatekeepers, but we've entered like a new territory where there's like new challenges and new like tricky things that occur. And I agree though. We are post gatekeepers for sure. It's just like sometimes it can be like its own hellscape where like there's so much just volume. It's like how do you make yourself out of an ocean? It's interesting. It's really interesting.
There's a lot of landmines as well that you can tread on, I think. But just to elaborate, like Lucid made a good point. I think that, for example, now as an indie developer, all you need to do is reach out to a few influencers, and a few more people show your videos, and then bigger influencer sees it and goes, I kind of make some money off that, no sweat. And then you can, if you're lucky, you might be able to get them to cover your videos for free. And then, so there's a very organic way of even marketing, and traditionally marketing's
But what's interesting?
It's so expensive.
What's interesting is that we're in the early phase of this. But I think influencers are going to be the new gatekeepers. Like IGN, like we're seeing like sort of a shift in power. Like IGN is declining. I think it has some power, but it's still declining. The rise of the influencer is getting stronger. Like, for example, if you're a shmup developer, like Donkey has this little side interest in shmups. And if Donkey makes a video about your shmup, it's like the hand of God came down and anointed your game. He like touched your game and it is now anointed. Like, so like the influencers are now in their own way sort of becoming their own version of gatekeeping, but it's like reversed. Rather than like blocking things like IGN does, instead they like pull things out of the water and like lift it. So they're like, here's Zero Ranger, this obscure shmup none of you have ever heard of. I, Donkey, will reach into the ocean and pull it out. And everyone's like, oh shit, Zero Ranger. So it is interesting. It's like a different form of like gatekeeping where it's like game choosing or something.
Think how bad it would be if Steam didn't have a good store. Like if it just showed you like random things based on some really bad algorithm, right? Like sales numbers, total. Like, if it wasn't really looking at it by like how good your game was doing at converting impressions, because then you'd be a small person, you would never get found. You'd have to be dependent on either IGN or Donkey or some other big game person pulling your game out of the water. Now that's like a nice bonus.
That's a really good point.
You're not dependent on it. You don't need it.
Yeah.
It's so
but if it happens, holy shit, that's nice.
That's so interesting you bring that up, because as a YouTuber, like a full-time YouTuber, I live and die by the algorithm. And you're right in the sense that like if there is a god of the Electric Underground, it is YouTube's algorithm. Like that is my god. And sometimes it can even start to create almost like old school style of what's it called? Like magical
Superstition.
thinking or superstition. Yeah, like for example, like if there's a video where I'm like, this could go viral, not viral, but like it could do, none of my videos go viral. It could do well or it could not do well. Like you start to develop these superstitions like, okay, you release the video at this time, that might help it. And everything's like, and everything in YouTube's like, maybe not, it might matter, might not matter. So you're like, okay, I'm going to release at this certain time. And then you start to develop even more superstitions like, okay, I can't look at the video's views for 8 hours because if I watch them, they won't grow. But if I don't watch them, because all of the experiences I've had of my games, like, or my videos, like really taking off have been like when I didn't suspect it. So then it creates this sort of like implicit superstition, like, don't look at it. If you don't look at it, it might work. If you look at it, it won't work.
It's like the inside of an LLM, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. But I think too, this is going to be the same thing with indie games. Like the wrath of the algorithm, it's both your savior and your demon. Like if the algorithm anoints your game, it's heaven. You've made it to heaven. If the algorithm, for whatever reason, does not anoint your game, you're in hell. So it's like both. It is like,
but
both
these
cool
algorithms are both good enough that like it's really the algorithm's people. It's like if people like your game, you're anointed. If people don't, you're not. I don't think that, I mean, I'd love to look behind the curtains. Like if I could see how it's doing
there's this sort of snowballing effect. Like YouTube does this too. I've seen this in real time. Like there's a sort of snowballing effect where like let's say there's a game that's actually really cool that you guys might actually like. It's called Void Stranger. It's made by the developers of Zero Ranger. It's like this really cool puzzle game that I think had the absolute potential to be like an Undertale style success. But that type of game, in terms of everyone who's played Void Stranger, it's amazing. It's an amazing game. Everyone loves it. But it didn't quite catch the algorithm. There it is. Yeah. It didn't quite catch that spark. So it did okay, but it didn't have that snowballing effect. And so
it's not done badly.
Like that's some. Yeah, exactly. So like,
I mean,
but
it looks like it did pretty good for these graphics.
Yeah, that's a lot of sales actually. That's
a lot of sales for a game looking like this.
Yeah.
But Void Stranger has a very, like, the Zero Ranger guys have an established audience.
Yeah.
So it could have done bigger numbers if the algorithm like caught it, if the algorithm grabbed it. Yeah, so like sometimes in the world of the algorithm, it's not like your video tanks or doesn't tank. It's more like, does the video just kind of do word of mouth, average audience numbers, or does it like catch that snowball and just start going? Because then once people find it, then more people find it, and then more people find it. And if you look at like how views work on YouTube, like your videos rarely ever like linearly grow. They're rarely ever like a linear graph. It's always an algorithmic graph where it's like your video's doing normal, then it's expanding, and then it's going bigger and bigger and bigger, and you can watch the arc of the views, and then it kind of tapers off. But like views seem to come in these sort of algorithmic snowballs. I'm assuming it probably works the same way on Steam as well, where like if your game catches on and then it's on the front page longer and then more people are talking about it, then it's getting more reviews, it's getting more positive up thing, and then it's powering into the algorithm more and it's staying up long, so it like builds on itself in this interesting way.
Yeah, it does. There's a few things that you can do to stack the odds in your favor as well, like, kind of knowing when the sales are, ensuring that you're not releasing your game at a time when there's competing stuff, that kind of thing. There's a whole,
don't release your game on Wednesdays because Wednesdays are unlucky. We all know that.
Yeah, there's just a whole bunch of stuff, man. Like, I know some people who are really into this stuff. Like, they're really into the algorithm stuff, and they are top of their game. Like, paid super high amounts of money because they
my God,
they know how to do it.
If you can speak to the algorithm, you're like magic. That's basically like you have magical powers. If you can speak to the algorithm. You know what's funny though is like being a YouTuber. You start to really look into this stuff. And so I sometimes now like will instinctively, like if I see a video, like let's say I see a video that looks kind of viral-ish, I will always go to the channel and then look at the whole channel. And the trend you almost always see is like 1,000 views, 1,000 views, 1,000 views, 1,000 views, 80,000 views.
Yep, that's how mine was. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Well, me too. I've been on that. I have that myself. I have one video that's like around almost now 400,000 views.
Yeah.
Mine, I think, are a little bit more consistent, but you have those outliers. But some channels, I almost think it's like a curse. Like I've seen some channels where I'm like, the algorithm is like tormenting you because they'll have like 100 views, 500,000 views, 100 views. It's like that's just mean, YouTube. You're just torturing this poor guy.
It is. That guy's not done his adequate sacrifices.
I think that a lot of time, like my channel, it's on Dominions, right, which is a kind of niche, small game. And I mean, it's not that small. There's a pretty big multiplayer
big for a strategy game,
stuff,
yeah.
but it's not big. Yeah. But like my channel's not going to grow any bigger. I'm not going to get many more views than I'm currently going to get because the Dominions game is about as saturated. It's saturated its little market, and I've saturated the Dominions market in a way. So it's that's just how it is. And I don't think, for example, that certainly if the Steam algorithm was like only showing Dominion stuff on the everybody started getting blasted with it. There was a big marketing campaign. Of course, there's going to be more sales. Of course. But I don't think that they're going to get any more sales than they would have if they as Steam than if they showed something else. I think they would get less. I feel like they've probably I think Dominions is a great game, but I'm guessing it's getting about as many people as it's going to get, unless they were just going to be unfair and show it way more than they should. And that's sort of also how I feel about my own YouTube channel. I kind of know how many views a video is going to get, but my videos are all sort of on the same topic, so it's kind of easy to know. But I don't know. So I think I look at this game, Void Stranger, and I'm like, yeah, it looks like it tapped out. There's people who played it and they liked it. And it's easy to look at these numbers 95% positive. Well, if they showed it to more people, then it would have sold more. The algorithm's suppressing it. I look at this and I'm like, damn, they did a good job of finding the people who are going to like this game.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying it was suppressed. I'm saying that it could have caught that algorithmic snowball, but it didn't. And there's so many, but my point is that there's so many games like this out there, but we always know about the ones that caught the snowball. Cause that's what I'm saying about YouTube torturing YouTubers, not intentionally, but sometimes accidentally. Because let's say you're a YouTuber and you're uploading a video every few weeks and that gets 10,000 views per week. In the grand scope of YouTube, you're actually doing really well. But YouTube itself is showing you every day, all day, everyone else's hits. So you're like, my 10,000 views sucks. I suck. I'm not growing. This isn't working. But that's because you don't see there's another guy uploading a video every week and he gets 800 views. You don't know about that guy. He exists. I find them sometimes. I'm like, oh, there you are. But we only see the way these algorithmic systems work is you only see the people on the rise. You only see the people who are moving upward, and you don't see the people in the hell zone that aren't growing. But I don't think it's necessarily purely just quality. I think quality is a part, but there's some times where you could do some pretty quality stuff and it will just stay at a more indie level. It won't grow. It won't explode. It's not in the cards for that game. Like Void Stranger.
Here's what I think. If Void Stranger were the kind of game where if Steam were to show it to people, just they show this trailer to people and people are clicking on it and buying it, if showing this game a lot more would make Steam a lot more money, they would have done it. That's what I'm saying. So there's something, the game might be great, but this combo of the trailer and then how it is when you first start playing it, plus the reviews, plus how people are playing it on YouTube, that combo is such that Steam's not going to make a lot more money if they show it. I don't think there's many games where if Steam were to show it more, they would make a ton more money compared to other things they could show.
Yeah, but
yes and no. I think that the one thing I would say about that is you are discounting the 20-hour gamer effect I was talking about, which is where something comes along and they see it and they go, oh, that looks cool. I've got $20 or $12 spare, I'll grab that. And I think that's where the money is in selling games on Steam. Really, is the vast majority. The vast majority of people who buy your that's not going to be with Dominions, yeah. Just for Mark, Dominions is a really complex, super complex, very intricate strategy game. It's got a relatively low player number, but it's got quite high multiplayer because it's an extremely involving multiplayer game. Dominions is a very, very good game. It's like one of the best games ever made if you're a strategy game person. But just to put it into perspective, I would expect that what Lucid's saying about Dominions is very true, that it has about saturated its market, and unless someone like Seth Zintach or someone does a video on it, which apparently he's been threatening to do, but unless there's a big famous content creator makes a very good video, the hand of God comes down and then and anoints it, which by the way that's got downsides as well. Anybody in the Star Sector community will tell you what happened when Seth did the Star Sector video. It did cause big problems in a lot of ways, but it sold a lot of games too. So, and anyway, without that, Dominions is probably not going to grow a whole lot more because it's such a niche thing. However, I feel that the 20-hour gamer effect is small on a game like Dominions. On a game like that retro game looking thing, sorry, I forget the name. Void Stranger.
Yeah.
Void Stranger. Void Stranger has a much, in my opinion, probably has a higher possibility of being able to be picked up by the 20-hour gamer effect and hitting the algorithm as a result. Because once you get more people watching that, once that's exposed to more people, I feel that within the potential market size, the algorithm can take you higher, I'd say. So I think it depends on the game. Like Path of Atra, there's no way this game would have had, what we're looking at, about 200,000 sales. Oh no, sorry, 40. What's that, about 40,000 sales, Lucid? Are we estimating?
I don't know.
Maybe
reviews,
somewhere between 40 and 400,000 sales, I'd say. So
it had some, but you can look at the reviews, and it's this was almost certainly hand of God coming down and touching it. That's when Seth another hand of God
did his video. Seth did his video, and all of a sudden you get these massive numbers of sales. So there's no way that game would have, because that is not a game that most casual gamers would probably look at and go, "Oh, that looks cool," because it's quite niche. Right. It's more niche than Dominions, in my opinion. And yet, it had the hand of God come down. So I think there's merit to both of your arguments. I think that the algorithm can give opportunities to people, but you have to game the algorithm. That's the point. The algorithm doesn't do it on its own, and I don't think it can make games grow beyond their natural consumer base generally, unless they've got a spanner in the works somewhere like a Seth Zintach or whatever.
Oh yeah, I do want to add an important point about the algorithm though, is that going back to what I was talking about with friction, like the game you're talking about, Dominion. See, as a critic, like looking at that game, I'm intrigued. It looks like it has a lot of depth and complexity. And so like a critic meeting Dominion together, they come together, that could be a very powerful pairing if the critic has an audience, because the critic can help push the game through that friction of like learning it, understanding it. They can help navigate that friction. Algorithms, they will always favor the least friction game. That's what I was saying with like Vampire Survivors. Another reason why it's so successful is it has so little friction. It's just like, it's cheap, you buy it, you're instantly in a progression system. Like, boom, you're in the progression system. You're right there. So it's really effective at that. But that's also like building the game into the algorithm style. Whereas what we were talking about before, like if you took Dominion and a lot of its like strengths of its design and stuff, and then you handed it to Algorithm Joe, and Algorithm Joe, they're like, Joe, we need your help to make this game more algorithmic friendly. He's going to be like, all right, these mechanics, too much friction. This mechanic, that's too much friction. Too much skill here. Too much punishment here. And so, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, the algorithm can be your god, but also it can be a demon, because if your game has a lot of natural friction that does not play super well in an algorithmic system, then actually the more traditional critic guys are there to they still play a really important role, because they can come in and say, listen, I've reviewed hundreds of games this year. This Dominion game is the best game I've played all year. This thing's killing it. And everyone trusts their opinion. Like, okay, so then they can get more of an investment than like an algorithm. Algorithm is like TikTok, you know, it's like hot girl, boom, I'm clicking. Math calculation, I'm not clicking on that, you know? So it's like, that is the gift and curse of like building your games for algorithms, though, is that you have to start accounting for, well, how much friction do they have? Do they have too much friction? And so that's why I still think critics can play a really important role in helping these more complex games reach bigger audiences, because without them, you're just at the fate of the algorithm.
I do think friction, first of all, I think that's an amazing point. I think that's and it's interesting thinking of Vampire Survivor in terms of friction, in terms of how that plays into the algorithm working with it, right? Because like, if you remember back what I was saying, I was like, you know, how well a game does has to do with this trailer. And then when people get in and play it, whether they're satisfied and they're like, yeah, it delivered the fantasy or the vision that I saw in the trailer, you know, and if they do, great, it works. But that's all like, if there's 4 hours of cutscenes I have to get through, and
or tutorials or learning
tutorials or complicated mechanics or like all these crazy things, like I'm gonna fall off the wagon before I come back here and leave a positive review.
Yes. Yeah.
And
arcade games fall into this a lot of time because arcade games are tough. They have a lot of friction. It depends. Some genres do, some genres don't. So I bet roguelikes, like a old school, like Battle Mode was saying, like a real old school roguelike, probably has a lot of friction as well, because you're like,
they do.
What's going on here? What's happening?
What does that @@ symbol mean? What's the speech marks? What's the pound sign do? Which one's the orc?
But and so in some ways it's like, okay, the algorithm is our god, but I think I think that's the best god we're gonna get. And I mean, it'll be nice to have critics and stuff, but I think it's worth, like, people should be having fun within 4 hours of playing. Like, it shouldn't, if you're like, no, you got to get to 12 hours and then you'll see the fantasy. It's like, no. And I'm not talking about just like a vet. I mean, like a new person who doesn't know what this kind of game really is. If they can't have fun in 4 hours, which, by the way, the game I play all the time, Dominions, you probably won't have fun the first 4 hours unless you're watching like a really good tutorial or something and are really hyped. You know,
it's a hard sell,
that's a problem with the game. It's like a fucking problem, you know. The
interesting thing about that is I actually agree completely. I think it's so important, and this is what a strength of arcade games actually is like, it's so immediate. You're right in there, you're playing. But the trade-off is, see, this is where I say, as a critic, I would really criticize Vampire Survivors, is it has that initial like, boom, you're in there, you're going, but it has no tail. It has no like back end, because once you achieve RPG breakaway, it's done. That's it. And it's not balanced beyond that. It's like some of the builds are so OP and stuff. Whereas an arcade game like Mushi-Misama, you have that a bit of initial friction with the difficulty, learning, but then that back half with the scoring system, with the TLBs, with the difficulty, it has such a big tail. And I bet Dominion's the same way. It's like, yeah, sure, you played Dominion your first day and you're like, what the hell is this? But you say like you have an entire channel about it, you're really connected to it. So the game must have like a really strong back tail, that like, you know, that staying power. And so that's very something deep. That the algorithm cannot capture that as well as the critic can. The algorithm can tell you if it's like immediately fun, but it can't tell you, all right, past the initial difficulty curve, there's really nothing left here.
Hey, wait, so are you saying, is this really punishing complex indie games then, and really supporting mainstream easy stuff? Do you think is that an oversimplification, or is that what I'm taking? That's interesting.
It's not that it's punishing it, because it's not that the algorithm is like targeting these games.
No.
But it's more like a natural consequence. It's like a natural barrier. It's like a natural barrier for a more complex, deep game. And that's why I think critics can really help with that. Because imagine, even in the, like, if you paired a really strong critic with the algorithm. So let's say, is there a Dominion 2 or a Dominion 3 coming?
Oh, we're on 6
We're
now.
on 6.
Yeah, this is Dominion 6.
I have no connection to the series. Okay, is the Dominion 7?
Yeah.
Is Dominion 7 coming?
It will do.
Give her about 7 years. We'll probably get there if Phil Winter's still kicking.
Yeah.
Okay, so in 2032, Dominion 7 is coming. And in that time, you as a Dominion reviewer, player, critic, you've built up yourself a bit of an audience here of people who like trust your opinion on Dominion, and you've built up sort of this fan base. And so then you take you and you pair the critic with the algorithm of the release date of Dominion 7. And that's where I think you can get some really special things happening, where games that normally would come and go in the algorithm, like maybe Dominion 7 would come, it'd be on the page for a day or two and go away. But if you get like a bunch of influential critics who are like, no, Dominion 7's the best game of the year. Let's all get ready for it. It's coming. Here it's coming. We're all going to play it. We're all going to discuss it. We're going to talk about it. That helps push more games with friction through that like barrier of the algorithm.
This is hard too, because the critics aren't going to, like, if your job's a professional critic and you need to review 60 games a year, like you're not going to have the time to really get into Dominions much more than the player, you know?
Yes.
And you're going to have to be going off what like I tell you, or some other friend tells you, like, hey, this game's really good. You should check it out, you know? But
yes,
it's tough. It's
with
real
the
tough. I
territory
think
of
ultimately, it's a sin of the game if the difficulty ramp to get into it, like it is a sin of Dwarf Fortress that it's so hard to get into at the beginning, you know? Like it just is. It doesn't mean the game shouldn't be made, but if there was a way to do it without it, yeah. But I think the risk is then you're like, okay, well, we need this like frictionless, smooth game, and then you get some executive in there, and then they start saying, well, let's make that the priority since that's what we really care about, and then you're producing corporate slop with no vision.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
You know, that's the world we live in.
I think that's the real balancing point of like the indie dev of 2025 and onward. Like your mission, like your challenge is like you need to make your game somehow be able to survive in this algorithmic landscape, but you can't damage the integrity of your game's like depth and longevity. And I actually think that's like a really creative type of endeavor you have to undergo.
Yeah.
Because if you're just an executive in a suit, you're exactly right. They don't care about the longevity of your game and the artistic vision. So they'll just be like, this mechanic, chop it. This, chop it. This crafting, add crafting. You know, like that's how it go.
Let's give you a sidekick.
Yeah.
Let's do pets. Yeah.
Right, guys.
But that was a long detour considering we were on closing thoughts.
Yeah.
40 minutes later on this.
Yeah, but it was an interesting point you made, man. I knew this was going to be really, really interesting. Sean and I wrote some ideas down for a pod, you know, and I was like, one of them was I wanted to talk about was game, you know, kind of the nature of critique, because it's been on well before I listened to your Patreon thing, Mark. I'd been thinking about it for about a year, and I'm not really equipped on my own to be able to be able to deal with this topic. So when I saw that you'd done that, and then Sean actually proposed it as a topic, I thought to myself, is that going to be a bit dry? No, this is going to be interesting because
it's such a relevant topic. It's so relevant.
It intersects with so many other big things. I mean, look, we got sidetracked down all sorts of little roads, and I think when we're talking, I'm particularly interested in games design and how these things affect games, and I think, you know, the way that they play, and it's clear to me that this is one of the big things. This is I've suspected it for a long time, but I'm starting to see now the mechanisms by which it happens. So great stuff, man. Thank you so much for coming and joining us, Mark. I hope you'll come back sometime and come and hang out.
Yeah, absolutely. Invite me whenever. I'll come back.
Yeah, great stuff, man. And Lucid, as always, man. I knew I wanted you on this one because I knew that you always have like a different perspective to me in a big way, and I think that's really, really good because I felt a little bit out of my depth on this one, but it's been really, really good to listen to both of you talk about this and just to kind of like filter out some of my own biases to some extent.
Yeah, a ton of fun. I'm glad we had this.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
definitely.
I love talking about this topic because it's such an important one. And I also really liked how we got into like the real nuances of it. You know, that's kind of rare that when you hear people talk about game reviews, you know, we get into like we're getting nitty gritty with like algorithms. I really liked it. It was awesome.
Definitely. Yeah, and we didn't even talk politics too much because I feel like that's the trap you get into with game reviews is that it becomes like political or something, and it's like that's not really what we're talking about. That's
one side of it. I think there are channels that focus on that in a big way, and you know, I think again, I feel like this is something I heard Mark say, but I think that if we're going to talk about stuff like that, you've got to come at it from a new angle. So you're saying something that the people who are, the channels that do that as a thing, you're not just parroting that, because I've seen enough of that now.
Right.
I know the issues.
Oh my God.
Like, there's a load of people on both sides of the argument, and you can eat to your heart's content, but I feel like I've overstuffed myself on that, and I feel if we're going to talk about it, let's come at it from an angle that people haven't really talked about, that actually moves the conversation forwards a little bit. But maybe we come to that another day. Thanks again, guys. This was Ben, Lucid, and Mark for Meta Abuse. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Let us know what you think in the comments, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.
Bye.
See ya.
Cheerio.